Kia ora and welcome everybody to the 13th of March 2024 Council meeting. I'd like to welcome many faces here today, many who I know, many who I don't. Kia ora and welcome to our meeting. Today we'll start off with a karakia and then our oath of affirmation. The opening karakia, whakataka te hau te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kine kina te uta, kia matara tara ki tai, I hi ahi ana ki akakura, hi tio, hi huka, hi hahu, ti hei mōriori. We'll just stand for the affirmation. Let us affirm today that we will, as councillors, will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our decisions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always be prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. Please take a seat. We have a full agenda today, and so I'd call for any apologies. Are there any apologies? There being none, I will move on. Oh, there is. Sorry. Yes, the Mayor. Who's he? Yes, apology from the Mayor. He has a family commitment which he has to be at today, so he's unable to be here. Would somebody I'd like to move that? Bob and Phil. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you very much. Identification of any extraordinary business. Is there anybody wants to identify today? Fine. There is none. Any conflicts of interests? No conflicts of interest. Right, today we have a public forum. We have many public forums today, many people at the public forum. First, a person to speak is Blair Dravinsky, Principal of Lemonwood Grove School, re the Speed Management Plan. Blair, I invite you up to the table to address us. The button on the right is the one you push to talk. The floor is yours, Blair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Kia ora koutou. Ko Blair Dravinsky toko ingoa, ko Otutumoaki Te Rutara Te Lemonwood Grove School. Thank you for allowing me time to speak today here at Council. And firstly, I appreciate that the report was given to me in advance so I have time to look over it. It seems to me that the government, the council and the school have the same priority in regards to reducing speed limits around schools. The one difference being is, as the principal of the school, it seems to be my priority where in response, Minister Brown suggested to me that the consultation period for the new rule that he announced on December 12th would start at the end of this year, which is just far too long away for us to get some change. It obviously impacts how council proceeds with the current action plan, and it also, within the report itself, there's a lot of uncertainty which worries me in regards to the plan moving forward. The role of the Selwyn District Council is to advocate for the community, and I appreciate that the report looks at the wider Selwyn region. However, different parts of Selwyn have different growth rates, and Lemonwood Grove School is now the largest primary school in the South Island and is the third largest primary school in the country. We are at 903 kids, and we're heading towards 1,100 in the next 18 months. The specific issue for our school as a speed limit issue around our school, I appreciate that last year the consultation proposed that there was a reduction from 60 kilometres an hour around some of our roads to 30 kilometres an hour. The new feedback would indicate that there's more of a temporary measure in regards to around school times, which we're actually okay with. However, East Madison's Road is a significant concern for us. It currently sits at 60 kilometres an hour, and the question I do have is around the council's ability to approve dwellings of where they have the data. So 2.2 kids is a national average. Selwyn's actually higher than that in regards to kids, school-aged children living at these dwellings. So therefore, we've got 200 kids in Westwood that travel across a 60-kilometre road, either by car, bike, scooter, or via foot, twice a day. It's incredibly dangerous. There's been an introduction of a speed hump in that area. but at the same time, according to the information being sent by Selwyn District Council, there shouldn't be speed limits exceeding 50 kilometres an hour for speed humps because it's actually dangerous for vehicles travelling across it now as well. East Madison's road sits as a 60-kilometre road in amongst 50-kilometre roads. So therefore, again, we've got a really unusual speed limit for one road. So therefore, people that tend to travel down East Madison's road well and truly exceed 60 kilometres an hour as well. The council, when putting infrastructure into the city centre or into the town centre here, as part of that process, put in a speed reduction to 30 kilometres an hour. That happened in what seems to me a lot quicker than the dwellings that are being built in my community. And as a result, I don't seem to understand where the council sits in regards to infrastructure being at the table when council consent is issued for buildings and dwellings, because they should sit hand in hand and the safety of the children should be paramount. And as I said, you guys have data analysts that actually have the data provided to make educated decisions around this. Yesterday I met with BGs, which are the ones clearing the land outside our school, not where Lemonwood Estate is, but further down. They are the absolute introductory level party for clearing of land, so the houses take a lot longer to build. But based on history, my concern is that those houses, again, will be there before there's any speed reduction in the area, which is of real concern. That area itself was initially set up for cafes, commercial, greengrocer. It's now changed to residential. 2.2 kids at 37. We're up over 75 kids again. Our site itself, you will see, has additional building being put on it because we were built for 750 kids. We're now heading towards 1,100. And the safety of my kids is paramount. Last week, we had a child, year 2, hit by a car on a bike, facial and oral surgeries. Helmet pretty much saved his life. But again, I don't want to be a fatality that causes the council to make a change, and I don't want to have to get in the media to make a difference in regards to what I consider a pretty common and easy decision to impact and make a difference. I was told that the consultation process was required, and like any consultation process, there were mixed reviews. This is common with any consultation process, and it was pleasing to see the Mayor and the Council take a stand on the naming of Te Ara Atia. There was mixed reviews with that. My question to you all now is, are you willing to take a stand on the safety of our children by making a change to speed limits in our community? Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. So ultimately, you'd like to see that speed limit at 30k. Is that the message you're giving us today?
Very much so, yes. And it's specifically to Lemonwood, but I'm sure my colleagues around other primary schools would say the same thing. And
you've seen the report on the council agenda today?
I have, I've read it, yep.
Yep, okay. And is there anything you'd like to comment on that report?
Just in regards to this, the message is pretty clear. We're very similar in our approach. It's just there's no timeline, and my worry is that the government consultation period is going to reduce, it's going to extend the timeline to see it into 2025, 2026. Yet if I had a child killed tomorrow, it would probably happen overnight.
Understandably. Thank you, Blair. Councillors, we have questions. We have a question from Phil Dean.
Hey, Blair. Look, first of all, before I ask my question, thoughts go out to the young boy and his family. Is hopefully they're okay. And so if you pass that on from the council, that's a
will do.
My question is the 30k speed limit the strongest thing that this council can do to improve safety around your school, or is there something else on your list you go, actually that's part of it, but there's also this?
Yeah, I mean, we're really appreciative of the Arrays platform, but when I met with the traffic management team, which are part of the council employees, they mentioned that it's only one part of the puzzle, and so the reduced speed limit would be a huge improvement. And it means that there's not an inconsistency with speed limits around the school. So if it's 30 every direction, 100 metres every way, there's no confusion for community members. And also too, with the dwellings and the builds, there's lots of construction workers who actually don't live in our community that are constantly driving it through our community, who actually sometimes have issues with the changing speed limits. So that would be a request, yes.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Sophie.
Kia ora. Thank you very, very much for coming to us, and totally feel for you, and particularly for the family of that young kid. So I've got two questions. One is hopefully very quick. So the role that you mentioned, is that including Waitaha School that's co-located? So they're additional?
They're additional, yeah.
How many kids are there at Waitaha as well?
The base school on our site, there's about 100, I think, 127, but across Waitaha, I think there's 280 across 4 different satellites.
Okay, thank you very much. And the other question is particularly for Lemonwood Grove. So obviously we know what the school hours are. Are there other activities? Obviously there's the before and after school, but is the hall in use after school as well that would involve children and families crossing the road later on in the day?
Yeah, good question. So in Farringdon, there's limited community provision. So our hall is incredibly popular, mainly with martial arts and church groups. So we're fully booked every day after school till 7:30 at night, other than a Friday evening. So every other day's got someone in it.
No more questions, councillors? There being no more questions, thank you very much for coming along. Very sad to hear of the injury to the child, especially when it was a local that may have caused it. So.
Yeah, and appreciate your support and continued willingness to work with me as we come up with solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're now moving further on into the public forum. Speakers, some of you have been here before, some of you haven't. You have 5 minutes to speak, as we have so many today and only 30 minutes to achieve that in. I'd like to invite Graham Evans to the front to just push the button on the right, Graham, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is my third appearance to talk on this subject, unfortunately. I am very concerned about the timeline that you've given us and the council to discuss a 174-page document. And my request is that you look at deferring a decision until we have had full time to consult and find some details. My request is that you don't vote. As long it's a big piece of documentation. Last July, the council called the community together to talk about the deed of licence. There was an input from the floor and a response back from the council. 8 months later, you call a meeting on the 29th of February and you produced a timeline which is very, very restrictive because it's saying we must sign to stay there. Now we have to sign this agreement, and I think the timeline you've given us is final sign 27th of May. That is not enough time. I'll go on further on to this now. I'm a third generation owner of a dwelling my grandfather purchased in 1923. The dwelling is a legacy for my family to enjoy in many years to come. I'm concerned that my property at the Selwyn Huts is likely to become a freedom camping area with the toilets that are there, common room, tennis courts and playground. The council seems to think that 96 hut owners will invest $2 million of their money for a piping sewer scheme to Pines Treatment Plant. For this sort of investment, we need at least 30 years of ownership at that compensate our investment. Prior to 2009, the Selwyn District Council confiscated the administration. In 2009, the Selwyn District Council confiscated the administration from the previous committee. The committee was budgeting for progressive replacement of the reticulation within the settlement. There were several attempts to the Selwyn District Council to pick up this request. Aggressively carry out replacement, but to no avail. Since 2009, we have lost the care and attention needed to maintain the settlement. We lost a caretaker, we lost a tractor, we lost the ride-on mower, we lost loss of a neatly mowed and garden areas around within the settlement. There needs to be more accountability as to the pending investment on the sewer pipeline. For instance, 1 year term of those that don't pass the building inspection, 5 year reviewable term, 10 year reviewable term, 15 year finite term. Based on today's expected values, our homes would fetch between $180,000 and $250,000. Our dwellings will be worthless. An added insult of having to pay a bond of possibly $5,000 refundable if we do remove our existing site. The pipeline suggested needs to be reviewed with respect to the shortened time of occupancy. Having a potable water tanks or Portaroo and fresh and grey potable waters. The investment of 1.5 to replace the damaged recirculation pipes would reduce the amount of stormwater that leaks into the damaged pipe or pipes, which have been videoed, and we have been advised that the movement in the damaged pipes is reflected that caused by an earthquake. The time the river has flowed over the bank upstream from the huts, the flood water has bypassed the hut totally by isolated access, but has isolated the access to and fro from the road. The flood water either flows to the L2 or flows down Days Road east of the domain. There needs to be more time for the hut owners for consultation period to study and make suggestions on future dwellings along with the deed of licence. We have had 2 days to read a 174-page document. We need to carry out due diligence and to establish a process use. Is it a flawed legal input? If you approach any person that said they had to pay $2 million to build an asset which will not be able to be used beyond 15 years and only have 50% ownership, then I don't think you would find anyone would be interested in that. The other precedent is the Others Pass. I have suggested, and in the other side of my page here, on the 10th of March, the agenda of the Upper Selwyn Huts future to be tabled full council meeting, complete with recommendations of climate change, Pines, community wastewater. Covered in both presentations is how we work together. It also talks about it is imperative that impact of the wider Selwyn communities are well informed and understand the reasons for proposals, and that owners and residents feel the process is transparent. They are well informed. They are supported. They have engagement with the process and feel involved. And it goes on to say the intent that an evolving and agile community plan will seek to keep target audience engaged, and that information is really available and clearly identified points of contact. The demographics of the target audience and influence the channels through which information is exchanged. That was in the final part of the report. It looks like
We're getting short of time, Graham.
it's an
so you
extract
wind
from
us up.
101 management degree. It's a pity that it wasn't put into practice. I have a lot more, but that's where I'll end.
Chairman, you can have my time to, I think it's important that you listen to it. If you're happy with that, certainly carry on.
Well, the concern that I have is that we should be on the district-wide plan for sewer and water. We've been ring-fenced out of it. And at the moment, there is a bit of information in the report that's saying if we were part of the district-wide scheme, then it would cost $608 or $308, and then we'd be charged per litre of water we used. I think the council needs to reconsider that. That's the end of my bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Councillors, do we have any questions? Yes. Councillor Miller.
Graham, I hear your request for further time. What would be an appropriate time frame from your point of view for before it is represented back to council?
Well, something has to happen before the 24th of June, 30th of June 2024. That's because the consent from the ECAN expires. Now, something has to happen before then, either to get an extension, or that's the timeline. June is the timeline, but I don't think we should be compressed into having to force sign something because it's structured to June.
No, the question I was trying to ask was, what would be an appropriate time for you to be able to digest the report that's there today?
Another month.
Thank
you. Elizabeth, you have a question.
Thank you for presenting today, Graham. Excuse me. I'm finding this quite emotionally difficult, so just bear with me. Do you feel, as a community member, and does some of your community here feel that they haven't had all of this information received over the last 12 months? Is a lot of this information new to you? And do you feel that as a community that you've engaged and been consulted with and had an opportunity to provide your suggestions to the council, and that they've heard what you've had to say, and that there's been a two-way conversation over this topic?
Answer to that is no. Yeah, from July through till end of February, we had heard nothing. So we've basically said, like, if nothing's happening, then we've got nothing to discuss. And until we know what's been put in front of us, we can't get involved.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Any further questions? No further questions. Thank you, Graham, for coming along once again and getting your points across. Thank you very much. Now, Susan Rogers is next on the list. Susan, you have 5 minutes.
1:22 p.m.
Oops.
Okay, you can hear me? I've just made some notes that probably talk to how I feel. I think I can speak for all of us when I say how shocked we were at the recent meeting to be told in a really cheerful manner that our time of living and or holidaying at the huts would be finite and that we could be gone in 15 years. There was no mention of compensation, although there's already precedent to do this in New Zealand. In fact, we're expected to pay towards demolishing our homes or our batches. This decision will make a number of people homeless, as those who live here have treated their homes as an investment for their future. We've expected to be able to live, maybe raise a family, or even retire here. When I bought my house 27 years ago, nobody told me I would ever have to go. Currently, rental accommodation is hard to find and expensive, and there's no reason to expect that this will get better over time. At the community meeting, the CEO said she would involve MSD and Kāinga Ora to help us. Currently, Kāinga Ora have a waiting list of 25,389 people, with another 2,466 people living in emergency accommodation, which are motels, and they are waiting to be placed into home ahead of the people on the waiting list. There's no reason to think that this situation will significantly change in the future for the better, because waiting lists have been a problem for years. I work with families, and I have done so for the last 25 years in both Christchurch and Selwyn. It is not unusual in both areas to find families living in awful situations. I see families regularly living in garages, mouldy houses, and overcrowded conditions. I have even met them living in the local campgrounds for my appointments. In Rolleston, I've begun to see really overcrowded conditions in the really small houses that are being built, that are being rented out. I've seen 3 or 4 families living in tiny little 2 or 3 bedroom houses, and each family is crammed into a bedroom, and maybe 1 or 2 families are sharing the lounge because that's all they can do. Some of the accommodation for farm workers is appalling, but they can't complain or they will lose our jobs. The proposal to inspect all of our homes is insulting. I have been advised that you need cause to inspect any home in the district, not some vague idea that we might all be hoarders or revolted our houses. There are no floor plans for many of our homes, as they were built before the SDC was formed. Permission had to be obtained to build them, and they were built to the code of the day. Many other houses in the district are as old as ours, and no records exist for them as well. I don't hear you plan to check up on them. And I think if you're really concerned with how we're living, I would start with checking out the farm workers and then trying to find the rental properties in Rolleston and checking them. There's a mention in one of the documents that the lease can only be for 33 years under the Reserves Act, but the Act also says there's provision for renewal. You forgot to put that in there. We would ask that you remove the finite term. Why would you choose to add to the homeless problem in New Zealand if it is still safe for us to be there? And it could be in 15 years, you don't know. If there are concerns about climate change affecting us, then why are there no plans to remove all of the houses around the lake and also the houses that have previously been flooded by the Selwyn River? We never have been. I have been told by a staff member that the proposal to charge us so much for the sewer system is because those on fixed incomes will not be able to afford it long term and are likely to walk away, making it easier for the SDC to shut us down. We should be on the district-wide rate for the cost. We should not be expected to pay 50% of the cost when we can only, you're proposing we can only use it for part of its lifetime.
2 minutes.
I've owned my home for around 27 years, and in that time I've been told by a number of councillors, some who are still elected now, that the huts are a blot on this otherwise fairly wealthy area. There was always concern that we would become a slum occupied by single mothers, students and Maoris, and these people have always indicated they would like to see us gone. You guys have had little time to digest the information, and as have we, and we would ask you to defer your vote in order that you can truly understand it rather than vote following a recommendation. Also, a couple of recent buyers who've bought in the last 2 years told me they were not told of a limited future here. I'll end just by saying how a society treats its most vulnerable is always a measure of its humanity. Making us homeless makes us vulnerable. Where is the humanity at the Selwyn District Council? The reduced time of 5 minutes to speak indicates how much our future is worth to you. Behind every door the council wants to close is a person, a family, a history, and a community that does not want to be erased.
Thank you, Susan. Councillors, any questions?
You'll make me cry if you do that. Don't do that.
There'll be no questions, councillors.
Defer your vote.
Thank you, Susan. We'll move on to Robert Thompson. Robert.
And think back to the pledge thing that you did.
Is it working? Yep. Good afternoon, the Deputy Mayor and Council members. I'm also just writing something that are my feelings. I am now 70 years old and have been a resident of the Selwyn Huts for the entirety of my life. My family, including my grandparents and great-grandparents, were also involved in the lifestyle at the Selwyn Huts, often coming out from Christchurch on a bike and sleeping under a gorse bush to go fishing in the Selwyn River. They were also involved in the negotiations, construction of the settlement known as the Upper Selwyn Huts. My father, John Thompson, and I were on the committee of the Sprinxton South Domain Board when the management was handed over from the then Ellesmere Council, which in turn handed over management to the SSRMC, which is the Sprinxton South Domain Committee, and the SDC as an overseeing body. The SSRMC ran the community, which funded and raised to build its own sewerage system with flush toilets, even before Christchurch had flush toilets, and was self-sufficient in every way. This was funded by the residents over years and did not cost the ratepayers. The community were given a sewerage pond area, a piece of land, provided they paid for the surveying costs. The Selwyn Huts is part of the Selwyn District, which has a water and sewerage as an annual general rate across the district. Selwyn Huts has been excluded from being part of this rate, which I find is discriminatory, and I ask all councillors to reconsider why this has to be and to vote on this matter in the appropriate way. Today you are voting on the finite deed of licence that has been constructed by Tim Harris. I'm not sure, but I believe the FDC do not have a mandate to change this licence, as the original licence was drawn up and ratified by an Act of Parliament. This deed is ambiguous in the fact that it has been drawn up on a whim that may be inundated, we may be inundated within the next 15 years due to the crystal ball syndrome that the sea level will rise. I have had 70 years at the huts and experienced the huts in all kinds of weather, And now I believe the huts are drier now than they used to be 70 years ago. The licence should not be finite, but should read that the licence be subject to a new review in 15 to 30 years regarding the seabed rise. I'm asking you, the councillors, to consider very carefully what the impact of your decision today would have on their life if they were to be a resident of the Upper Selwyn Huts. I think think about what the impacts are you are voting on affecting the lives of 300 or so children and adults who have a lifestyle of choice. You will also need to be aware that you do not have a property developer's hat on during this meeting. You are considering the sustainability of an existing community. The Reserves Act states the controlling body must have a reserves management plan, or RMP. I would like to have the reserves management long-term plan and the short-term plan tabled today, please, and a copy to myself. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robert. Councillors, is there any questions of Bob? Being no questions. Oh, Elizabeth.
Thank you. You made a statement that the huts are drier now than before. We've also heard that there's a wee bit of flooding that goes around the top. Can you just explain what you're seeing in terms of the weather patterns down there and why you feel that it's drier?
There's never been any flooding at the huts over the 70 years I've been there. The fellas who originally set the huts up obviously did some very clever surveying work, and they found that area where the huts are well above, where the water can go. And you've got to remember, in those early days, there was no stop bank, so the river ran wherever it wanted to, and it never ran over that piece, and that's why the huts are dry.
Thank you for the background. Any more questions? No more questions. Thank you again, Bob.
Thank you.
Robin McFarlane.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for letting me speak. I'm a fairly new home owner of the Selwyn Huts, Upper Selwyn Huts, and I've been there for 4 years, but prior to that I rented about 3 years. I believed it was a place for me that I could put some roots down and live there safely and with people that I find have a very community-minded place for me to live in. But anyway, I received the 174-page document on Friday, the 8th of March, which gave me 4 days to read this document, to understand and prepare my submission to the council today. Please defer making a decision until the Upper Selwyn Huts residents have time to do their due diligence. From this, we expect the council to have duty of care to the residents of the Upper Selwyn Huts. These are some of my concerns. We understand the lifespan of the new pipeline is 50 plus years, but from this you are offering a lease term of 15, but we are paying for half of this pipe system. We understand we need to contribute to the pipeline, but it seems to be an imbalance of the use of the sewage system for its longevity of life. The council will be responsible via duty of care for both parties, hut owners, families, and the council members during this stressful time. Hut owners spending their life savings on assuming permanence and possible inspection repairs via the new deed of licence with little or no return on their investments. For example, from release of the publication, the value of our properties are on decline. The average value of our homes are not 50K as your report. Some present owners have paid 100,000K or more, which is not recoverable in a 15-year lease, especially given the proposed conditions of the deed of licence. However, a 30-year lease deed of licence will help us with ongoing costs. A 30-year lease or infinite lease will give recovery or near recovery of our properties. This will allow us to pay for the cost of the bond and the pipe waistline. We do not believe that the lateral piping will need to be replaced in 15 years, as stated in the report, therefore no cost to the council. Would it be possible to consider a 30-year lease and at that time be negotiable at both parties? This would be an outcome that is achievable for both the Upper Selwyn Huts and the Selwyn District Council. And again, please refer making a decision today until the Upper Selwyn residents have had time to do their due diligence. Thank you. Thank you. Or and negotiational.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Some questions. We have a question from Elizabeth.
Thank you. Robin, is Robin?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you outline, if you can remember, any concerns that you have when you've looked at the new deed of license in regards to the inspections that they want to have with your properties?
Well, I think because of looking inside our properties is a concern for people. I think we all respect each other's space and properties, and I think it needs to be very careful in how that is handled. And I think everybody in the huts, I'm speaking on everybody, we care very much for our places and our property, and because we know they are historic and unique, we want to make sure that we respect that, and we would expect people to respect our own areas and properties, basically. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Lydia.
When you purchased your property, were you made aware of a resolution that council had made to determine that the hut licenses and renewals were short-term or ultimately in a finite period?
No, it was seemed to be that everything seemed permanent at that stage, and there was no clarity on that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McInnes.
That was effectively the same question as I was going to ask. This is probably more broad, thinking more broadly about other people who've moved into the area recently.
Yeah.
Is it your impression, do people get any legal advice? So for instance, when I bought my house, we got a building inspection, we had a conveyancer who looked over the deeds and everything.
I don't know what other people's conditions are, or if they have gone to lawyers. I can't answer for them.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Did you yourself?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. And they didn't alert you to anything around this? Interesting. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Sophie. Councillor Hassan.
My question was along the same, given that Susan Rogers also mentioned about local people, recent people moving in and purchasing their huts. And mine was around the requirement to actually view a property limb, a land information memorandum. And I just wondered whether they were made available, whether through your legal advice, people gained access to those land information memorandums?
I can't remember because it was such a long time ago, but I don't think there was ever any LIM reports available for our area. I don't know. I have to talk to other members about that. I don't know. Does anybody know? I can't answer that, sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much, Robin, for your input today.
Thank you.
Helen Colenso.
Kia ora. Brief introduction about myself. My great-grandfather was Dr. Charles Morton Anderson, who in fact built the third batch that was out there. It's now hut number 75, and I can assure you it doesn't look anything like it did back then now. Bob mentioned no stop bank at one point in time. That's what it looked like with no stop bank. I mentioned 2 photographs simply to mention the fact that hut number 6 has a photographic history of the entire settlement. I have photos going back to when my mother was 3 years old, to when my grandmother was alive, My mother died in her 98th year, 12 years ago. That's how old her photograph is. I'm going to speak on behalf of two other people who can't be here. First of all, hello, Deborah. Just a quick note to let you know who I am and voice my concerns about the possible demise of the Selwyn Huts community. My family were amongst the first, if not the first, hut owners. Charles Anderson was my great-grandfather, and Anderson Avenue, the first street in the settlement, is named after him. My sister and I, that's me, are fourth-generation hut owners, so yes, I do have a lot of emotional connection. Why is the small group of ratepayers denied access to the district-wide rating system? I believe that's been covered by previous speakers. Why would the council install a wastewater pipeline with a 50-year plus life expectancy and only allow the Upper Selwyn Huts a 15-year occupancy? Why would anyone in their right mind choose to destroy their own home? The huts are huts by name only. They are houses, they are homes, which cannot be removed or destroyed. Once destroyed, where will the 100 plus men, women and children put their heads down to sleep at night? That was covered briefly as well. The whole process is taking a huge community by devastation. Where's my next bit of paper? The next person I'm speaking on behalf of lives next door. Where's she gone? There she is. A building permit was issued in 2013, which was 2 years after the earthquakes. The SDC must have had sewage system knowledge at that time. 5 generations from that family have had holidays at the huts. If hut owners pay for the system, what happens next? There's been no time to discuss licenses before the SDC decision. The cost of the sewage and the bond, where is that money coming from? Because of the earthquake, haven't the Upper Selwyn Huts become an outlying suburb of Christchurch? There I mentioned the 100 plus people who are going to be made homeless. I invite anybody to come and visit me, hut number 6, Spackman Avenue. My entire wall in the middle room is covered with photographs. Please feel free to come and have a look at the history as per photographs. And I think that will be enough. Questions?
Thank you, Helen. Eloquently put.
Thank you, sir. Can I just say one more thing? My husband's great-great-uncle was William Colenso. He was at the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. He said the Maori do not know the meaning of this. They do not know what they are signing. Governor Hobson pushed him aside.
I think we'll leave that where it is. Councillor Munt.
Thank you for sharing, Helen, the history. Can you tell me how important is the history to this community?
How important is history to any family member? It's what our ancestors did for us. It's what we are doing. It's what we are doing for our descendants. History is incredibly important to every single one of us.
Thank you very much. There doesn't appear to be any more questions, so that brings public forum to an end. Thank you for your input.
Can I just have a 2-minute?
Well, Colin, I'll let you in. I'll let you in.
I didn't use the 5 you cut them off. So Colin Giddens is my name, and I'm here on behalf of Rowing and the Huts. And what I'm keen on, it's an amazing community and amazing people, and I love going down there, and I spend a lot of time there, as some of them will vouch. I'm sympathetic to their cause. I have a vested interest down there, but moreover, we're Rowing down at the bottom huts. The regional council are right in behind supporting us. We have tidied up part of the river. At the moment, we're setting up a Selwyn rowing group, which will be affiliated to South Island Rowing. And at the moment, we have 4 high schools and a university. And something that nobody here will probably know, we run a big anti-drug program in all the schools. And it's very successful and right throughout the South Island. And it's been received gratefully amongst the high schools, even though it's in its infancy, but it is working. And we are very hard on it because to keep it out of rowing, you've got people that are got self-esteem and are very employable. The other thing is the sea level. We are very conscious of sea level rise. The top huts are 10 metres above sea level, the same height as Lincoln. And if that rose a metre, you wouldn't get to Akara. Sewer, we talk about that obviously. I've got a friend that is a sewer wastewater guru, and he has reckoned it hasn't been researched very well because there's other systems that would do down there for a fraction of the price. And I can tell you the name, but you wouldn't know what I was talking about. Righto, that's all I need to say.
Thank you, Colin. As an ex-rower, thank you very much. That ends the public forum. No, I'm sorry, you are not in the public forum. We don't take comments from the public. Please sit down. Excuse me. That is not the subject we're in now. We have the item to do with the Upper Selwyn Huts at the top of our agenda just after a few reports. So you're welcome to stay and hear the debate as it unfolds after your input today. So thank you very much for that. We also have some written submissions from Odette Rose and Kiralee Fee, which have been circulated to the councillors for them to read previously. Right, we'll now move on to item 1, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Selwyn District Council held on the Wednesday, the 14th of February, 2024. Does anybody have any alterations, additions to those minutes they want to bring forward?
Just to say that I was present, please.
Pardon?
I was present.
Oh, you're not marked as present? We'll have that attended to, thank you. No other alterations or additions? Can I have a mover and a seconder for those minutes? Shane and Lydia. Thank you very much. All those in favour of accepting those minutes will say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. We will now move on to the Mayor's report.
Before you move on, I have a question about the matters under investigation, the document after the minutes.
Certainly.
My question is that in the spreadsheet there, it says that in April 2024, the community centre, halls and library network plan will be being developed. Can I just confirm that that is still on track for April 2024?
Chief Executive.
As far as I'm aware, yes, it is.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for that. And we'll now move on to the Mayor's report. The Mayor's report has been circulated for your information. He's not here to answer any questions on that today. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Deans and Councillor Mugford. All those in favour will say aye. Carried. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. Could we just acknowledge the tangi for Charlie Crofts, please?
Yes.
His passing.
Yes, we do need to acknowledge that a giant totara has fallen. Charlie Crofts left us a couple of weeks ago. A huge man in local regional politics and put 80 years of his life into this community. So do need to acknowledge the passing of a man who did a huge amount for his communities. Right, the Chief Executive's report. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Really take the report as read. It is brief this month. And just to note that we held our the investment strategy workshop today, and there will be a further workshop involving our CCO CORD for the 1st of May. So Just noting it's an exciting opportunity for council to be thinking strategically into the future around the kind of investments. So nothing else to add.
Any questions of the Chief Executive's report? Councillor Dean.
I know we don't normally make statements, but I'm just going to make one that this morning was really valuable. I think in terms of the first of two, it's going to set us up really well for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Just to explain to the public, we had a workshop this morning on an investment strategy for council for the future, which is one of several where we're looking at what we do to invest our assets for future generations. Okay, I have a mover and a seconder for the Chief Executive's report. So, Shane and Deborah, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Carried, thank you. Right, we'll now go on to report 3, the Upper Selwyn Huts Future Occupation Strategy. There are several recommendations at the top of this, and 1 to 4, and I intend to move around the table for input and questions as we go through. So bearing in mind, councillors, that we are here because there was a resolution of this council in 2019 that unanimously determined that hut licences and subsequent renewals are short-term and ultimately for a finite period. This report is not revisiting that decision, but it's looking at the complications of that, and that is the time period and the need of licence. I'll hand over to Tim Harris.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, we have a number of recommendations and quite a long report, so I intend to take the council through that just in terms of some of the key points. Just before I start though, and just picking up from you, Malcolm, a decision has been made in 2019 that the deed of licence will be finite and for a short term. So these set of recommendations do not intend to relitigate that, but obviously that is up to the councillors. So that's the starting point. I guess the decisions here we're seeking is to provide some more certainty in terms of timeframes, and there's a number of options on the table. It's to provide some more detail on what the future for the hut owners looks like, rather than being left with a open resolution saying that things are finite. So that's the overarching intention. I guess the other point is that we do want to set up a multi-agency project team, and some certainty in terms of the decisions we're seeking today will allow council to do that and put that in place. And so this is a beginning of a conversation that will go on for a number of years in terms of what that future looks like and some options that might be available. I guess the other point I'd make is that timeframes are tight. I guess one of the key drivers here is the ECAN consent. We're on a continuance with ECAN, which means we actually are operating without a consent. They're only doing that on the basis that we come to a decision sooner rather than later about the future of the Selwyn Huts. Deferring the decision, while it's not impossible, would place that that agreement in some jeopardy. So that's one of the key drivers. And also the other driver is the timeframes around the existing deed of licence, which expire in June. The other consideration, I guess, is that there are a number of communities around the lake that are having similar conversations. And again, having some consistency and approach for all of those communities. I do talk about this in the report. We're talking about Green Park and the lower Selwyn Huts. So they're having similar conversations, and that's another driver for, I guess, why we're sitting around this table today. So there's some opening remarks. Just going to the recommendations, and we'll come back to these at the end of the report. There's 2 sets of recommendations. The first is a set of recommendations seeking acknowledgement of a number of factors, and including that there is the early decision made by the council. And I guess the second set of recommendations, starting at number 2, is around, I guess, the proposal that we're putting in front of you, and it's the set of key decisions that we're asking the council to consider. And they're detailed in the report, and I'll step you through those in a minute. So just turning to the purpose of the report at number 1, I guess there's three main purposes. One is to get some agreement from the council on a proposed approach to the Selwyn Huts and what finite actually means and looks like. The second part of the purpose is around getting some confirmation on the cost recovery mechanism for the wastewater system that has been proposed. And I guess the last part is around the deed of license, which wraps those two components together in a legal agreement between the council and the hut owners. I won't take you through the history in detail. You have it there in front of you, but just a key number of themes. Our numbers are a wee bit sketchy, exactly. So I'm not sure exactly how many. The public forum has indicated over 100. My report says 96, but I stand to be corrected. Sorry, 75. The number of huts we've got here, the licenses is 96, and there's some hut owners that haven't been notified. Well, they're used occasionally on an occasional basis. I guess one of the key themes for the hut owners is there has been since the 90s, as I understand it, a drift from temporary use to permanent use of the huts. From my understanding, the huts were never intended to be a site of permanent habitation, and that to some degree is reflected in the size of the sites and this layout of the village. So looking at paragraph 3.3, and this points to the expiry of the existing license in 2024, and it talks about the consent and how that has expired. Consent is not in place at the moment, and he can letting us continue our operation, but under a clear expectation that we'll come to a view about what the future looks like for the huts in the near future. Back in 2017, there was an attempt to form a committee that would look into the future of the huts, and that committee did get together, but about a year later, the council decided not to support the recommendations of the committee and asked staff to reconsider options. And since then, as I understand it, the deed of license has been operated and issued on a short-term basis. Climate change, on the next page under discussion at 4.2, there is climate change impact across all of New Zealand, obviously. One of the issues for the lake is that it is opened periodically when it reaches a certain level. As the sea level rises, the ability to open that lake changes because the lake needs to be higher and higher to achieve the required gradient to empty the lake. So we don't know, but it's sometime in the future, and the science tells us it could be between 80 and 100 years. There will have a significant impact upon all of the communities around the lake. Now, admittedly, the Green Park and the lower Selwyn huts are more affected by climate change, and they also have some more significant infrastructural issues. At 4.4, I talk about the other communities around the lake, and Ngāi Tahu are currently in discussion with the residents of Green Park huts, and as I understand it, there is an indication that they will need to leave in June of this year. The lower Selwyn huts, again, there's a discussion that DOC is having with these hut owners, and they're talking about a 10-year transition concession. So those two sets of conversations are underway currently. And at 4.5, I talk about the need. Well, I think the advantage of having a joined up conversation with all of the hut owners around the lake, and indeed we have been in discussion with Ngāi Tahu and DOC about the direction that we're headed in. And so at 4.7, I talk about the pipeline connection. So again, that decision came from 2019, and it was decided that we would put a pipeline in. The actual cost of that part of the pipe is about just over $4 million. And I'm not an engineer, but I have a support staff here that can answer any questions around this. And there was a view at that stage that the wastewater solution would be fully funded by the Upper Selwyn hut community. At 4.8, I set out a table in terms of some costs, indicative costs for the pipeline. And as been pointed out, this pipeline will last a lot longer than the 15 years that's recommended. So it's more like a 50-year lifespan for the pipe. And again, I guess there will be some opportunities to use the pipe for whatever occurs in the future if the community does leave the site. But on that basis, I think there's a fair case to say that the hut owners should not actually carry all of the recovery of the cost of the pipe. And so that is why staff have recommended that perhaps council should review the early decision on fully getting the funding fully from the community, and we've suggested something more fairer, maybe 50%. Now, currently, the work on the pipeline has stalled, and we're working through some issues with some stakeholders over that, but we do anticipate that we'll be able to get that moving fairly soon. At 4.12, I set out some recommendations in terms of dealing with the waste. There is an option, obviously, of taking the waste away by truck. That is quite expensive, and after 5 to 7 years, actually the cost of putting in the pipe becomes very attractive. So the cost of trucking starts to overtake the cost of the pipeline. So that option is not recommended. Option 2 is the recommended option. So we go ahead and get the pipe in, but with a slightly different model for repayment, with the council carrying 50% of the costs of the pipe. Option 3 is that the community bears the full weight of the costs, if that's not recommended. And option 4, and has been talked about by in the public forum, is that the community is joined onto the district-wide rating system. That isn't recommended following earlier discussions and decisions made by council. But again, that's an option that the council could revisit if it wants to. The existing infrastructure reticulation around the community will start to need repairs at some stage. Our engineers have estimated 15 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 20 years, but at some point it will need to be replaced. And the figure that I have been given is that the replacement cost is in the vicinity of $1.5 million. And I guess that could be seen as a driver for having a 15-year period of for the term of the deed of license. But again, that doesn't mean to say that the council is bound to follow that recommendation. So 4.14, I start to talk about the terms of the deed of license, and you can see those options there. They range from less than 10 years up to 30 years. The recommended option is 15 years, and that's been discussed and is quite well understood, I believe. There is some constraints in terms of the Reserves Act of having a deed of license that lasts over 33 years, I think. So that is something that wouldn't be possible in terms of the existing law. The next section of the report, I talked about transfer of the deed of license. So this happens when the huts are sold, obviously. And there's a number of options there. We could allow full transferability, but the recommended option is that we have a phased type of approach to the transfer deed of license. So for the first 10 years, and this is just a suggestion from staff, other options, the way you could cut it is open to the council, but the recommended option is that we have a first 10 years, people can sell the huts to anyone that they want to, and the deed of license is transferred. In the last 5 years, this be constrained somewhat to having to family members and or identified people. So that's another decision the council will need to consider. Look, I've got current and residual hut value here. I've been provided figures. We've heard from the hut owners that they're wrong, and they well could be. So I'm not going to argue about that. the compliance, a lot has been said about the compliance, and I do agree that the council will, this is a fairly tough issue. We have received legal advice that the council, as the people who hold the, or issue the deed of license, we have some legal responsibilities to make sure that there is a reasonable level of compliance down at the hut. And I'm talking about, I guess, risks from building failure, health and safety, fire could be an issue. So there is an obligation, and if anything did happen down there untoward and someone was hurt, the council would have some legal responsibility for that. So our advice from our legal advisors is that we do carry out some sort of inspection or compliance process down there. I do tend to agree that entering into people's homes is invasive, and we would need to have a good look at that. I guess the deed of license might, strictly speaking, give us the ability to do that. But I think from a staff perspective, we'd be saying we just want to go down there and have a look to make sure the structures are sound and there's no untoward hoarding or anything that could cause problems from fire risk, etc. I guess, and there was some talk about, well, why not go and have a look at some other houses around the district? There must be some older houses down there, and indeed there will be. The difference here is that the council is also the person or the body that issues the deed of license. There's an extra layer of responsibility, and that's what drives this part of the recommendations, is that we need to meet those responsibility as the issuer of the deed of license. And so I stepped through that in terms of those compliance issues. So I think there does need to be, and this is spelled out in the deed of license, some sort of inspection put in place. I think the council would need to be sensitive to the hut owners for this. I would anticipate that we'll be talking to hut owners about what that looks like. We haven't got into the details yet, but again, I acknowledge the concerns of the hut owners of this, and we'd need to show some tolerance and understanding of the issues down there, and certainly wouldn't be inspecting in terms of the current standards. And our building team have talked about building regulations that date back to 1947 as an appropriate bar to set for these inspections. At point number 6, I talk about the funding implications, and there's some short-term and long-term funding implications. And at I guess at 6.5, council staff are recommending that we do put in place a bond. That was suggested, I think, a few years ago, but it wasn't followed through after feedback from the hut owners. Staff recommendation is that it would be prudent to have a bit of a fund there that might be needed to remove things that the hut owners do go to remove, perhaps foundations or other bits and bobs. So there is a recommendation that we put that in, $383 per year. That's over 15 years. So if the term of the lease was changed, that figure probably would change as well. At 6.7, I've got a estimate, and this is just a rough estimate of some future costs that a deed of license, and again, this is over a 15-year period. We're looking at an inspection fee. That looks to me quite light. Legal costs, again, they're only indicative, and they're set out in that table under 6.7. At 7, we get into some of the potential models for the repayment of the pipe and what that looks like. So that first table is the cost. Potential annual upper Selwyn costs based on hut value at 50K, with 50% of the wastewater pipeline costs recovered. So you can read those there. There's options in terms of 5 to 30 years. At 7.2, that just gives you a bit of a baseline in terms of what a 100% recovery looks like for the hut owners if that was the council's decision. At 8.1, obviously, this is a sensitive issue. There are some potential reputational issues for the council. The council will be aware of that. And so that is just something to bear in mind. And we will have to have some communication. And That is the end of my report. I don't think I've missed out through anything else. But happy to take questions. As I say, I've got some staff here that can come up and assist me if I can't answer the questions or add to the conversation. Thank you.
Yes, before we take questions, depending on what we make a decision of today, the way forward will then be some consultation over the hut licence agreement.
So what the plan is, and I acknowledge it is really tight timeframes. The plan is to try and get some direction from council today, and then to get the deed of licence out to the hut owners as quickly as we can, to allow them to have some further consideration of that and provide some feedback for the council and try and come to a final decision. It would mean we'd need to come back to council probably in late May to be able to meet the timeframes. It is tight, but that's the proposed timeframe.
Thank you, Tim. Now, I'm intending to go around the table with councillors, so I'm intending to start at this end, Elizabeth, so you'll be able to form some more questions while it's happening. Okay, Elizabeth.
Oh, I don't mind it. Should we go around the table, Malcolm? It's fine. I just actually wanted to ask Tim specifically 2 questions to answer from this before I made my statement, but I'd prefer to speak a little bit later if anyone wants to go first.
Well, you're going to get,
if we're only speaking
standing
once.
orders, you're going to get one shot at this.
Right, okay.
Make the most of it.
Maku I kai atu, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What is the most important thing in the world? It is the people, the people, the people. Our council affirmation tells us that we're here to serve our community and that we gather to enhance the well-being of our district and its communities. What we need to look at is whether we are serving with best practice as a council. And I feel that we are not serving as best practice. The Waikato University has an effective community engagement. I'm going to quote a few things from this piece. Managed retreat interventions have a higher likelihood of being accepted when they are interpreted by those involved in and affected by its process, that it is fair, transparent, and inclusive. We've heard today from this community that we have done none of those things. Meaningful engagement involves and empowers people rather than simply seeking their views. Building relationship and trust are key factors of successful engagement. We need to consider what is the best practice for introducing the managed retreat to this zone. We need to consider whether we should be using an independent provider to facilitate as and when required. There is no need for the style of proceedings when other districts around New Zealand have been implementing citizen-initiated solutions. Why are we rushing? We have already delayed in the past the deed of licence. The community are asking for only 1 month. It is March. If we give them till April, then they have 1 month to come back to us. There is no reason that we can't be having the community opportunities to engage in that time frame. My concern is that if we risk implementing these unaffordable costs, what are the resulting issues? Where is our social impact report? We have a 50-year sewage solution, but only 15-year consideration for licences. Our community consultation was never a two-way encounter. We've heard this from the community today. It is time for us to be exemplary in this area and community focused. This is what our affirmation is all about. I want to raise attention to the Aqualink report as well. The Aqualink report tells us that the sea levels are projected to rise by 0.9 metres by 2100 because they've used the RCP 8.5 model. The RPC 8.5 model has now been rejected by the IPCC because this is a reference scenario, and less than a decade later, the IPCC AR6 said that the RCP 8.5 should not be presented as business as usual. We've had a court case up north in which the High Court has declared that the IPCC AR 8.5 is no longer to be used in council for the modelling for those coastal flood modelling maps. And so we need to understand that we need to be really, really sure that we're using the correct up-to-date scientific reports when we consider the managed retreat zonings. I don't see, if we are bringing the pipeline in, which is our requirement by council, that we can't give these people what they've asked for a longer period of time to stay here, for them to have assurances and certainty that we are representing them fairly, for their chance to engage with our community and with us as council and to have their say. Thank you.
Thank you for those statements, Councillor Munt. There doesn't appear to be any questions. I'll now move on to Councillor McInnes.
Okay. Kia ora, Tim. Thank you very much. And I'd like to acknowledge all the staff who worked hard on this report as well, and all the community members who've come today. I think I'd like to start by acknowledging that this has been a very long time coming, and yeah, our communication has not been exemplary for the most part. But there are reasons for the time frame, and most of that revolves around wastewater consent, and try as we might, that part we cannot escape. We've heard today a lot of people not very happy about the length of time that the predicted age that the wastewater pipe would get to, the length of use, compared to the 15 years being asked to pay for. But we've not really acknowledged as yet that the pipe would not be going in at all if it wasn't for trying to keep this community going for at least another few years. The pipe was not on the plans until, other than this wastewater issue. So to me, it's still fair that the community pays for a good portion of this pipe. The fact that the community, the rest of the district, is paying the other 50% is acknowledging that it's a high cost. On the flip side, the other argument that we've heard around district-wide rates, the figures that are in this report and that have been circulated in the past, if the district was paying for the entirety of this wastewater pipe, then those figures would be incorrect. Now, don't believe our financial controllers here at the moment, but those figures would go up significantly if the entire district was paying for that. That's not something that we can escape. So if everyone else pays, then that means the whole district pays. And I acknowledge that this is difficult for the Hutt community, but the district is already telling us that they do not like the rates increases that we are proposing. It would not be nice to put another 4% or whatever the figure is. I plucked that out of the air. That's not me. Feel free to fact check me because I have no facts on that particular one. The other big difference is that, as Tim has mentioned, regarding things like farm accommodation and private rentals anywhere in the district, we as a council do not administer any of those. This is public land. This is a reserve that people live on. We actually have no right whatsoever to go to other private accommodation and inspect them. However, on legal advice, we do have a duty of care that includes checking that those buildings in the Hutt area, the condition and everything else, but absolutely acknowledge that this would need to be done sensitively. I don't know how, because this is an extremely sensitive topic. Nobody really likes anyone going into their house for that sort of matter. Regarding the climate change part, one thing that's not mentioned in the report is the fact that the Aqualink report and other predictions just generally around climate change is that extreme rainfall will increase in frequency and intensity over the next few years. That means that it's not just the sea level rise that is the problem, it is the amount of flooding that is coming down the plains and into that basin. Sure, the Hutt community has not flooded as a community as yet. It has been cut off in the past though, and by the sound of it, that's going to come increasing. And that's something that we all contribute to in the form of civil defence, but that doesn't mean that it's safe to allow it to continue and continue indefinitely. Regarding the plan going forward, I love the idea of the obviously there has to be a project team there. But like Tim, I'm wondering whether there are a few things that might have been aren't necessarily budgeted for in there at the moment. For instance, it would be in terms of, because this is quite a fraught process and it's not going to stop being a fraught process. If possible, it would be really good to have something like some independent facilitators, for instance, as Elizabeth mentioned, maybe 1 or 2 people whose job it is literally to be an advocate and a supporter and a navigator, because this is going to involve people over the next few years moving out and needing to find somewhere else to be and support to make that change. Nobody wants to kick anyone out immediately, but 15 years, it can be long or short depending on what your time frame, your personal circumstances. And I think we need to cushion that as much as we can without dropping the reality that it needs to happen. And like just about everybody else around the table, chances are I do not really have much in the way of a question other than, can we please fix the date in 3C in the resolution? Because at the moment it looks like we're going back in time. Many thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McInnes. Councillor Miller.
Like Sophie, I want to acknowledge to the people here that we haven't handled this well. It's a given. And I've been trying to put myself into your shoes, and I can never truly understand how you're feeling, but I've given it a good go. And this is our first attempt at a retreat conversation. And I don't think we've handled it well. That's the honest truth. So clearly some work to be done. Can we rescue the situation and move it forward? I think we can, but it's going to take goodwill on both sides. I think why it's got to the situation, this is only my view, it's not the council's view, is that we haven't wanted this day to come. We haven't wanted to have this difficult conversation. Everyone in this room is basically a decent person and doesn't want to tell someone that their house is not going to be habitable in 15 years' time or whatever that was going to be. There's no joy in that. None of us here are jumping up and down going, I was looking forward to coming today, because inevitably what we do today affects your life for the next 15 or 20 years, or whatever that might be. So I take no joy in that, but it is a situation we've got to, and we should have grabbed the nettle earlier. We should have done the hard yards earlier, but it wouldn't have taken away that this day would eventually come when we had to have these very difficult conversations. Some of the questions that were raised in the public forum, I'd like to ask Tim just to give a wee bit of clarity to. The first one is around the sewage solution. There were some suggestions around costings. My recollection, I'd like it confirmed by the staff, is that we did an extensive budgetary and took into account a number of suggestions from the Huts community about what might work and what would be cheaper, what would be consentable, more to the point. My recollection of it was that there was a bit of a eureka moment when we decided the pipeline was the most consentable and cheapest, but if staff could perhaps confirm that and then I'll ask another question.
Murray, I might ask you to comment.
Yep, no, happy to confirm that. So I was involved in a working party which included a number of Upper Selwyn Huts residents, and we worked through a number of options, including on-site wastewater treatment and disposal on-site in the reserve adjoining the hut, so bringing the disposal area from where it is currently to a higher elevation. That disposal area had a number of options. One was to take up pretty much the whole reserve area in disposal. Other parts was to form raised bunds and limit that area considerably. We looked at the cost of trucking the wastewater away, and at that time the pipeline was going to be too expensive because we're going to pipe this wastewater all the way through. So eureka moment came when we looked at putting the pipeline from the Ellesmere wastewater treatment plant in Leeston up to Pines, and that connection pipeline was then a lot shorter, and that was the eureka moment. As Councillor mentioned, the consentability of an on-site treatment plant so close to lake would be very challenging and likely not to proceed, and so that's why the pipeline suggestion solution came about.
So my reflection on today is that the sewage situation must be solved today because there is no plan B, and it must be implemented, the sewage solution, to give at least an immediate response to the community. So after June 24, you can still flush the toilet and still continue to live in the huts, because that's the risk, is that we don't have a sewage solution. The question was raised around district-wide rating, and it's been traversed extensively in past meetings. But I have a lot of sympathy. This is my personal sympathy. If you've got a 50-year asset and you're only using it 15 years as proposed, well, you're only using it for 30% of the line, should you pay for 100% of the cost. So there's some, in my view, there's potentially a possibility, this is only my view, that the wider Selwyn community could recognise this as our in our decision making. So I'm just suggesting that there might be some consideration to that. My second point I wanted to ask the staff clarity around was, it was suggested in the one of the public forum members that their lawyer hadn't advised them of the limb note. Could we give some clarity to the table and to the audience here how long the limb notes have been in existence, telling residents of the likelihood of ability to have extended stays there? Because I think from my recollection there's been extensive limb notes for a significant period of time, but if someone could confirm that.
I might ask Leandra to assist me with this. You can come over here, Leandra. But my understanding is that on a lot of occasions, and I'm not too sure for the proportion, but a significant number of transfers came to the council's attention post them actually happening. So obviously not all of the transaction would have been subject to a limb request. There will be some property files that if someone made some inquiries, Leandra, perhaps I'll just pass to you.
I can't answer the limb note specifically, sorry, but in terms of how the transfers happen, it would depend on whether the purchaser of the licence at the time did order a limb. What those limb notes said at the time, I can't answer. Generally, I understand historically what has happened is council has become aware of the transfer after the transfer has occurred, but generally it would be part of the purchaser's due diligence to satisfy themselves as to the terms of the licence that they're acquiring.
Thank you. I want to talk about inspections of properties, because I realise from a community perspective that would seem quite intrusive. I suppose from my perspective, I just wanted to give a wee bit of history from what I understand, and acknowledging that they are an historical, may have well been in existence close before the Selwyn District Council, or its forebears were in existence, the huts. But in general terms, the council has taken a very enabling view of the huts. There's been a sort of even the name itself suggests, well, it's a sort of hunting, shooting, fishing huts, and let's just leave them alone and let them get on with life in general, which was okay in the 50s, 60s and 70s. But as times have changed, the requirements for more comprehensive inspections and due diligence have changed with it. And I suppose I'm not in favour, obviously, of privacy intrusion, but I am in favour from a risk perspective of understanding that the houses reach a minimum standard, and that we are not officious about it, but we're enabling, and help the people to actually get there, which is what I heard the staff saying, that they'd be enabling and not out to try and tip you over the edge, but enable you to say, well, actually, there's a wee bit of a problem here. This is what you need to X, Y, Z to get to where you want to be, which is where I think we were going. Is that the way I read the... I think, again, a bit of history, and I was here when it happened, is that previously there was a limited number of permanent residents of the Selwyn huts, and a number of residents which could stay for a fixed period of time before having to vacate, and then they could return again. And the driver for permanent residents came actually at the Christchurch earthquakes, when a number of residents asked us as a council, would we consider allowing them to stay in their huts while their main place of residence was repaired for the earthquakes? Which at the time, we most willingly said, well, that's a good solution. Why wouldn't we do that? We'd enable that to happen. Again, to try and be enabling. But what I don't think the intent, and my recollection of, was the intent wasn't that we would form a permanent township on the lakes, on the shores of Te Waihora. It was more of an enabling document to help people who are in a pinch. So that's my view of how we ended up with the permanent residents from where it had been a hunt and shoot and fishing type village. I think that Elizabeth made some really good comments at the start, particularly about our dedication at the start of working together to make sure we serve the residents of Selwyn. And we do that in two ways. We do that by making decisions which provide clarity to our residents and provide enabling outcomes for our residents, but also at times are not that nice. And that's probably where we are today. And I want to be clear that it is a finite licence. I think the question we're discussing today is how long is that finite licence for? And my personal view at the moment is that I feel as a council we haven't done enough in that communication space to allow the residents to have time, as Graham discussed, to actually process this information and make a considered response, and then allow us to say, well, okay, what is the amount of time that would be acceptable for this licence to continue to, acknowledging that it is a finite licence. The issue that I perceive is that once you start extending the licence out past 15 years, inevitably in that 15-year period, there'll be a large number of those licences which will transfer to a new owner. And that new owner will then turn up to the council in 15 years' time and say, oh, I've only had this for 5 years. I'd like another 20 or another 15. So providing clarity to residents of today and the future, whether that's done today or in a month's time when the residents have had time to collect their thoughts, have time to ask considered questions and got considered responses, I think that's an outcome that I would support. So I just want to quickly run through my notes to make sure that I haven't missed anything. There's only one chance to go through. I guess I can't miss this opportunity not to. We like to be collaborative with our partner agencies, but I just want to note that this is a piece of dockland that we manage on their behalf. And I would have anticipated that Doc might have been here because they basically thrown us a hot potato and said, you deal with it. And I don't think that's right from a government agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant, for your points. Councillor Reid.
Thanks for coming to see us today and sharing your thoughts to give context to our decisions that we're making today. This is really tough, and I can say that I'll listen to all what you've said and to what is said at this table before I make a decision. The others have largely covered a number of topics, so I won't repeat, but interesting points that Grant's brought up, if we're looking at the pipeline, and also just with speaking to the residents and giving them time to actually digest what is in the documents and such like. And I I support the facilitator that Sophie and Elizabeth has talked about to work with the community. We've done that before where we've had friends of submitter for RMA processes and such like that, and I think that's the least we can do if that's possible. Thanks.
Chief Executive.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, councillors. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for just giving me a chance to say something. In terms of the queries around more time, Tim referenced the fact that this is a two-staged approach. So the first part is around the deed of license and the wording and some finite time, then the intention is to take it out to the community, to enable the community to have that in-depth look and discussion and ask questions, with a view that we are coming back to council at the end of May. The purpose behind today is to give that signal, again reiterating it as a finite period of time. This is the suggested period of time that's going to be finite. There is the second opportunity in May to hear back further. So we're not precluding or excluding the community from having that in-depth look and providing that, which is why we've deliberately and intentionally put in a second step. And we acknowledge that that creates a very crushed timeline, but it does provide that opportunity. Whilst it's not written in the paper, part of the next steps following any decision that comes from councillors today is a very holistic project group. And within that holistic project group, there will be a team that works within that. And it's about very much recognising that that project group needs to be made up of community members. It needs to be a multi-agency approach. We do need to have community navigators involved as part of that approach. So my apologies that we didn't sort of narrate that better in the paper, but that is very much the intent behind it, that we are looking at this from a very holistic point of view.
Thank you, Sharon, for those points of clarification. Councillor Hassan.
Thank you, and thanks for being here today. I've had a long association with the committee right up to the disbandment of the committee over nearly 30 years with regards to the huts. And many of you who were involved in those committees will recognise that I was in attendance at your meetings until the disbandment of the hut committees. When I was present on the committee, Grant is right, it wasn't permanent. There used to have to be a 3-month stay or leave that you would actually leave, and then you come back. But the committee at the time had very difficulty in completing that requirement due to the complexities of managing the huts. There was also responsibility for that committee as well, as acting basically as the rent collector and from a reserves committee and passing all of that funds over to the council, which was a great responsibility. And you know, I mean, in the end, it would be fair to say that the responsibility, because of the complexities, was handed over to council. During my time, there has always been the understanding that it was never permanent. You had to have a fishing licence to be there. Then there was the establishment of a caretaker and a few to keep the caretaker in a protection right. And then suddenly around the disbandment of the committee, when it became very difficult to police the 3-month stand down period, a new younger people who came on, bought their huts, established 2 committees down there. And it would be fair to say that what happened from there was a creep in the numbers around the storage capacity that could hold the more people to be down there, and then it led to permanency. Then it led to the request of not only having family members use the hut, there were requests for them to become rental accommodation. So this has been a slow progression. And in some cases, I see people nodding, maybe a slow train wreck from what the huts were originally established. We do have different priorities. And we do, unfortunately, have to put a finite time on the huts due to responsibilities with change in legislation and our administration role. And that's the reality. And as someone has said, Grant has said, if we go for 30, then when the new people come along, they'll want another 30. We have issues around climate change, which are very real. So I do sympathise, and I know a lot of you have got a lot of investment with regards to your huts down there, but there's also a lot of risk as well associated with if the accidents did happen or something did happen, would you be able to rebuild your hut tomorrow? That's something that you actually have to ask. And it's a question we have to actually ask ourselves with regards to reviewing the draft deed of licence. And this is a question that I want to ask council. Given that we administer the land, but we don't own the buildings, if under clause in the report 56.6, arrears happen, we've got no ability to actually recover those arrears. Is that how I'm reading that question? Sorry. Is that how I'm reading that clause? Sorry, I could have a drink. Sorry. Oh, hang on. Do you want the page?
Yeah, Deborah.
Normally we'd be able to put something against the actual the land itself, but because there's the council owns the land, that becomes more difficult. So, and I might ask Leandra to comment, but I guess there's less levers to pull. That's what that paragraph is saying in terms of recovering the money, Leandra.
Yeah, so in regards to collection of arrears, there's really only two remedies. The first one is penalty interest. The second one is a right to terminate if the breach isn't remedied within a specified time frame.
Okay, so basically, if you can't afford to pay the rates for the huts and you're in arrears and you don't try and make agreement to actually trade your way out of those arrears, then a termination can actually happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Do you want, sorry, Tim? Yes, it would be at council's discretion at the time on a case-by-case basis, but the legal document provides for those two remedies.
Okay, because as I'm reading this, currently the Upper Selwyn Huts licence is $1,389 based on a 50k property cost for the huts. Sorry.
So the annual licence fee?
The annual licence fee. And that would be increasing to over 5,000 for the 15 years. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. Which is actually, when you look at our current debate that we're having with our ratepayers with regards to the rating increase, that could be looked at as a comparable of increase similar to what our ratepayers are looking at. I'm just speculating, but we're looking at, say, a 16% rate increase, hypothetically, or for our proposed draft, and that is what many of the ratepayers would also be required to pay in the general rates. Hang on, no.
Yeah, I think the increase is more than that.
Okay. Just trying to ascertain what proportion of increase are they going to be paying? It's 5,600. Page 36.
I think it's in the tables, Deborah.
Yeah, 5,552.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, I'm not too sure what they're paying now. I might ask Sean for that information, but it's substantially more than 16%, that increase.
Okay.
And I want to jump the queue, but I've asked.
No, sorry.
Point of order.
It's
I'm
in
sorry,
relation to that.
Deborah has the floor.
Okay. So getting back to Grant's question with regards to the 2 million proposed cost of the sewage being 50-50, and if the 15 years was given, I'm tending to agree that proportionally, to ask the huts to actually pay 50% of the pipeline when it's built for 50 years probably needs to be reassessed. That's my personal opinion. So that's more of a discussion that I would like clarification around, and that's where I am. But there has to be a finite time. Fully agree. 15 years. If that's the norm, that's fine with me. But I guess it comes down to the fair apportionation of costs and what is reasonable for the hut owners to pay within that 15-year period. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Councillor Mugford.
Yeah, thanks very much for you all coming in and talking to us. The main thing for me to get sorted today, as was Councillor Miller, is the waste system, because if you don't have that, you don't have anything there. So it's something that we have to decide. I think there has to be a finite time to this. I think as far as the pipe work goes, I think that 50% would be, as in the report, would be something that we could work with, and I think that's probably fairer. But the one thing that I'm not too sure about is the 15 years. Maybe it would be a wee bit fairer if it was a bit longer than that, to actually make up the difference in the cost of the pipeline. So I would probably be looking at the 50% for the pipeline, and maybe somewhere in between the 15 and 30 years for the lease. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Megan, you have something you wish to say?
Yes, kia ora. So the paper canvasses the history and the issues and solutions really well. And Tim, you've spoken very well to this paper today. I want to acknowledge the community speakers and also acknowledge that you've done really well to represent your community today. And I'm not a voting member of this council, and instead, and for that reason, I've been given permission to read a statement on behalf of my community, which is mana whenua, Ngāi Te Rua Hikihiki Hapu to Taumutu Runanga, and our position has been expressly supported and endorsed by the chair of Ngāi Tohuriri, which is also mana whenua in parts of the Selwyn district. So this statement will come as no surprise to councillors or to community members present today, because we've expressed this in meetings with both parties for many years now. For Green Park Huts, Lower Selwyn Huts, the Upper Selwyn Huts, we have sought for all leases to end on the 30th of June 2024, and our position has not changed. We held a comprehensive wānanga on the future of Green Park Huts at our marae in March 2021, which was relevant for the decisions on the Selwyn Huts. We obtained legal advice on the leases, climate change modelling, environmental impacts on the hut settlements, on the natural environment, including our tonga, Te Waihora. We obtained details on affected whānau and our ability to practice mahinga kai, which is to harvest food. And I share that information with you so you know that we made a well-informed decision. And to explain the impacts on us and our community, we lost significant land through treaty breaches, and in righting that wrong, the treaty settlement process permitted us to recover very small parcels of land. We chose Te Waihora and we chose Green Park. And why? Because for customary rights to exist, we require continuous use of contiguous land. In other words, we need our whānau to be regularly fishing at the same site to maintain customary rights that we have had for hundreds of years. My great-grandmother and my grandfather and my father all lived at and grew up at Green Park Huts. It's a personal place for me and my whānau, and they live there today. So this was a very hard decision, but it was a brave decision. And we ask that councillors make an equally brave decision today and do not defer your decision. This has already been a long, hard, drawn-out process that's had many engagements over the years and I would say decades. Please do not draw this out anymore. Uncertainty is stressful and harmful. We ask that the licences are ended as quickly as possible. 15 years and 10 years is too long. And we ask that as you do this, that our values of manaakitanga are embedded through the process and you work with government agencies. Kia ora.
Thank you, Megan. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, councillors, and thank you, community, for coming in. I have made lots of notes, and it's helping me with my decisions today. I'm going to focus on three different areas, Tim, and I've got questions for you about those three different areas. The first one is about section 5.6, where there is significant safety issues that you've highlighted in that section. I'm really concerned that we as a council have allowed some community under our protectorate, for lack of a better word, to even potentially have those sorts of considerations. I mean, that's you've raised things like dangerous effect in sanitary buildings, unauthorised building works, lack of routine maintenance, hoarding, dogs that can't be kept on park, arrears, potential fire risk, and across the budget, natural disaster. I'd be interested for you to just tease it out a wee bit further about how real that concern is, because that's probably my biggest concern in this report.
Thank you, Phil. I'm not suggesting that all huts have these issues. These issues have occurred at a small number of sites at my time here in the council. And I guess that's the reason for the inspection part of the deed of license, is that we just don't know. So that is, we need a fact-finding mission. We need to set a baseline and a stock take, if you like, of the compliance issues, and that would be giving effect to some of our obligations under various pieces of legislation. So that's why it's there. I'm not saying that this is widespread, but there are present and past cases where some of these issues have arisen. Okay. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. It does indeed. It's something that now that I'm aware of it, I believe that I'm now compelled to actually keep this in the front of my mind, and I will regularly visit this, and I'll be asking the question regularly about the state of the upper Selwyn Huts as we go forward, whatever decision we make today. I want to turn now to the pipeline. We've been talked a lot about the pipeline. On the back of a napkin, or in my book over here, I've just done some maths, which I thought might be interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, and it appears to me that the Selwyn District Council staff have come up with an absolutely amazing solution. Rather than paying $730,000 a year to truck waste out, by the way, that comes down to $7,600 per hut. Then you've actually come up with a solution that is going to not halve that, but shave that off by about 70%. Am I right with that? Am I right with those?
It depends what term we're talking about. But if you're talking about,
let's say it was a 15-year term.
Yeah, it is a substantial. I haven't got the figures right in front of me. Murray behind you might be able to give some more detail, but certainly I think after 7 years, it breaks even in terms of the cost of the pipeline. So if you say that you double that, then the figure you're talking about wouldn't be too far off.
Right. So I guess which is great. I mean, that sounds to me like it's a significant saving of I think the suggested figure for the 15 years, if I got it right, was around $2,200 per year, as opposed to $7,600 per year, which I'm sure is a much better dollar value. The life of the pipeline is definitely Selwyn District Council, and all the residents of Selwyn District Council are going to benefit from this way beyond the 15 years. I don't think there's any debate about that. And I personally would support some other numbers lower than 50% in terms of the recovery, and I guess that's a statement more than the question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll finish there.
Thank you, Councillor Deans. Councillor Gooden.
First off, I think and I'd like to acknowledge the residents that are here today and to thank our speakers for coming and representing your community. Making these decisions is really tough, and as Grant alluded to, we don't look forward to these ones, but it is our job to make decisions. Personally, I sit in favour of a 30-year term with some strict phased deed of licence transfers. I believe a finite time must be clearly communicated from Selwyn District Council. A 30-year term would make us compliant with the Reserves Act, and it would also allow for intergenerational change or succession planning. A 30-year term factors in social licence or social wellbeing, and the Local Government Act states that we take wellbeing into consideration. I also take into consideration the lack of clarity from Council around the 2019 resolution to have a finite deed of licence. I look at Green Park and Lower Selwyn Huts and assess in the Aqualink report, and I believe that the Upper Selwyn Huts is not under as much risk as Lower Selwyn Huts than Green Park to climate change or sea level rise. To address the wastewater pipeline, I believe a 50% cost recovery in a 30-year term would lessen the financial burden upon our hut owners. That's all I've got, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glidden. Councillor Epiha.
Tātou katoa, te whare today tēnā koe. Ngai te riu hiki ki whānau tēnā koe. Tangata tiriti, tangata whenua, ngā mihi māna i ngā kōrero, i ngā kaupapa o te rā, ngā mihi. Thank you to the residents that have turned out today, and I can sympathise and empathise, as many of our people have been through similar situations and circumstances. Ultimately, as has been discussed around the table, it's decision makers and governance roles to make decisions in the best interest of the district. And making decisions in isolation is an impossible task for councillors. In that respect, I'll move the entirety of the report, but I do seek clarity around Graham's month by accepting the report. The communications will still continue with the Huts residents over the period of time given that month, so that you can form whatever the group looks like to come together to discuss further. But the questions around affordability, really, and Grant's mentioned it, it does seem a little unfair, the percentages given the lifetime of the pipeline and then the affordability to pay that off in that period of time. So we would also seek opportunity to explore the 30-year period, but the question really is whether you can afford it. So over a 30-year period, is that still affordable? Looking at the figures that are in front of us today. I've just got some notes here, and if you seek your indulgence, Mr. Chair, just want to give acknowledgements and thanks, and also respect Megan for mana whenua position, because it is a quasi-judicial process that we're going through, and through the charity of council and the wider district, and some of you are also general ratepayers as well as hut owners, to share that cost. It's been shared across the district in a sense. We already are benefiters from a district-wide rate, in my own opinion. There'll probably need some backup or figures behind that. What we're actually asking in effect is to continue to support the lifestyle, and that's not for anybody here to judge. I mean, we're not going to sit here and tell you how to live your life or what you do with it. It's up to you. So there's no contest there. But there is certainly, what is missing is the other statements of intention from our partners in this. And we've clearly heard from those that have put their points forward today. I think all of the recommendations put forward strike a balance between the Local Government Act, Local Government Community Wellbeing Act, 2019, the Local Government Act 2002, the Company Directors Act, to act in good interest and good faith and best interest, and the Ngaitahu Claims Act, Settlement Act of 1998, also the Reserves Act, to name a few. It's important to note page 21, 3.2, the Local Purpose Reserve, and it's been spoken to already, of which the Upper Selwyn Huts is a subject under the Section 61 Reserves Act, records that a lease shall be for a term no longer than 33 years. We're now at the 47th year since the Act. of 136-year occupations in 1888, of extra land that was gained with the passing of the Ellesmere Land Drainage Act in 1905. That also the licensee, through the deed of license with the Selwyn District Council, they own the hut, the Crown owns the land, and the council administers the land. The licensee currently pays $1,389. 610 goes to wastewater treatment, 308 for drinking water at about 80 cents a cube, leaving 470 for what? Is it roading? Is it rubbish? And what if we were to leave everyone to their own devices? Does that mean turning the tap off? Why? It's, I guess, the purpose of why and installing the pipeline was to ensure we met not only the consenting issues, but the health and well-being of the land. And if the land is sick, the people are sick. By putting all our wastes into a pipeline and getting it transferred over to here, it ensures that the land is healthy and our people can be healthy on the way through. We pick up the campgrounds. We also pick up the huts. So the health and well-being of our lake that we're all responsible for and that we all love and enjoy a piece of. I've got a whole heap here, but it's probably not worth going through it. It's been already stated. I support that. Oh, actually, I did wonder if a consideration could be given to Section 206 of the Local Government Act, alternative uses of development contributions for reserves, whether that had been already considered, because I'm not an expert, but in that, despite sections 197 and 205, if the territorial authority considers that the district in which the development is situated has adequate reserves, or that it is impracticable to purchase or develop reserves in that locality, it may consider, if it considers it would be of benefit to the residents in the district in which development is situated, to use development contributions. That was so is it possible under that section to alleviate potentially some of the costs through that section there? And maybe it isn't, but I thought I'd do some research to try and find other ways to alleviate costs for everyone.
Just before you start, procedurally, before you finish, we've gone over our 2 hours. We need a procedural motion to extend this over 2 hours. Moved Deans, seconded Mugford. All in favour? Carry on.
Yeah, so look, I'll take some legal advice on that. It sounds to me, though, just my first take on that, that the DCs would be for the development and maintenance of reserves, not for alleviating financial costs on people who live on reserves. So I think that would be my first take on it. But Leandra, have you a view? I haven't got that
no
that
view
section in
until
front
we
of me.
look at it in the context of this situation.
Yeah.
Just to your 4.14.2 option 2, I had agreed to the 15-year period to align with my submission, but I would like, if it is possible, to consider the 30-year period, whether that is actually an affordable solution. Transfer of deed of licence, agree the council has a responsibility under the Local Government Community Wellbeing Act 2019, and understanding that being professional, provided it gives dignity and integrity to the residents and ensures their safety and mitigates risk and ensures their care from fire, potential flood, to name a few. Compliance, back to that duty of care. In conclusion, I'd like to offer our waiata, our council waiata, which is ko wahi makariri ki te raki e, ko ora kaia ki te toka e, te wai hora e hora ke nei ngā te oranga o ka iwi e, mā wahi rā e tauri mai e ngā hau, mā aku mā tātou e. Wai makariri to the north, Rakaia to the south, Te Waihora out in front of us. Who is responsible? You, me, all of us. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Shane, you did mention that you wanted to move the resolution in its entirety, and then you have said that you would support the total maximum period of 30 years. Do you wish to make that change and you're moving it?
I would like it to be considered, and potentially it's up for further debate. Your worship.
Well, that would require somebody to move an amendment. Do you wish to move it as it is at this stage with 30 years?
I would like to move an amendment for a vote on both, because there has been conversation or with
Well,
either.
we'll let it flow. You've moved it in its entirety as it is now, and we're seeking a seconder.
That would be an important point of a consultation.
Councillor
with
McInnes
executive order.
is seconding it. Now, do we have any amendments to the recommendation in front of us that has it at number 2 at 15 years? Anybody want to move an amendment to increase that time period? The process of where we are at is Councillor Epihar has moved the report in its entirety, and it's been seconded by Councillor McInnes. If anybody wants to amend any of the things within that report, like the time period being greater than a total of 15 years, this is the time to move that amendment.
Right.
Councillor Miller.
I'd like to see clarity on a couple of points in the report, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Page 27 talks about the cost recovery over a 15-year deed of licence period, and it tells the cost to Upper Selwyn Huts is $1,405. If you go to the table on page 36, you then have a 15-year period of 2241. So different numbers. And I guess this ancillary question to that, which I think the Upper Selwyn Hut owners would like to know, is it being done on a rating valuation basis? My interpretation of it is that they should, no matter the rating value of their house, they should all pay the same portion for the wastewater pipe. Are some people paying more because they've got a higher valued house, or are some people is it an equal lump that everyone's going to pay?
Well, I'll start at the beginning of your observation. As I understand it, the table in the first, the figure in the first table you mentioned is the actual capital cost recovery. The $2,000 figure is that recovery with the interest added.
Okay.
So that's the reason for that difference. I did pick that up myself, and that's the explanation I received.
Right.
In terms of your second question, I may have to seek some financial advice on that. My understanding is that there is an equal proportionment of costs of the pipeline, but the rating component is separate and is added on to that. Now, that is my understanding, but I'll have to get some confirmation of that.
Okay.
I'm getting a nod from the back row, so I take that as the case.
Just one last piece of clarity, Your Worship. The Chief Executive indicated earlier that if we made a decision today on 15 years, there would be an opportunity for the community to come back once they've had time to consider the implications of the report. Did I understand that correctly?
That's absolutely correct. What means is what we've indicated that we will do is, following the decision from council today, the deed of license, etc. We will be out engaging with the community. We'll receive feedback on the deed of license and any other aspects of the report, and we come for that absolute final decision making in May. So we are still seeking a time frame and a finite time frame, so we still hold to that. But yes, there is a final step of us bringing back a final paper in May.
Councillor Hassan.
I'd actually like to take the recommendation in two parts, if that's possible.
It's already been moved in its entirety.
Okay. Well, the amendment that I would like to consider, sorry, can I just go back to recommendation? It's around the 50% funded by the Upper Selwyn Huts community. And I
Sorry,
realize,
Mr Chairman, aren't we debating the other matter first?
no, it's in its entirety. That's what my understanding
Haven't
is.
we had a mover for the
We have had a mover and a seconder.
So we are debating the
You are
30-50.
if you're putting an amendment, please put it, otherwise we'll put the recommendation.
Okay, that the council agrees that the.
Point of order, Mr Chairman, we already have a amendment on the floor.
An amendment from?
Amendment moved by.
No, I'm sorry, we don't.
I stand corrected.
Deborah.
I'd like to move an amendment to 4, that the council agrees that the Upper Selwyn Huts portion of the Wolf Pines wastewater treatment pipeline connection will be 25% funded by the Upper Selwyn Huts community. That's dividing the 15 years from the 30 years. So I've moved it. That's my amendment. If I don't have a seconder.
Yes, I'm happy to second that.
Second, we will now put the amendment.
No, hang on.
Has anyone
Hang on. Is
seconded
there
that?
debate?
To change it from 20 to 15% funded to.
Well, I support the amendment, but not in that 25. What I was putting forward, Deborah, was that whatever term is agreed by the council, we use a proportionality. So if it's a 15-year term, it's 30% of the cost. If it becomes a 20-year term, it becomes 40% of the cost. So there's a proportionality. So there's a methodology behind it, not just saying 25% in 15 years. We actually have a proportionality so that if we revisit the term, there's a proportionality attached. Would you support that amendment?
Yes, I would.
So you're willing to alter your amendment to that, what has been put forward by Councillor
Well,
Miller?
yeah, because that explains it more clearly. I put 25% because I was looking at the 15 years versus the 30 years. So, but it's the 15 years plus, you're looking at it from the 50-year.
We haven't debated the term yet, but I'm saying whatever the term might be, we have a proportionality to it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm leaving it at the 25 then. Clarity. So
Any
you'll
more
have to move another amendment.
Any more speakers on the amendment which Councillor Hassan has put forward for 25%?
Lydia, yes.
Mr Chair, I think based on the comments that Councillor Miller has made, I have a full appreciation that we probably need to debate the term before we debate the other. So I'm withdrawing my seconding of the motion.
Okay, the amendment is now lacking a seconder. Is there anybody else wishing to second that amendment at 25%? Sounds like an auction. There being nobody else willing to second that amendment at 25%, the amendment is lost.
Sorry, can I quantify here? Are we going for what Grant's proposed or what Deborah's initially proposed at this
At the
point?
moment, both have failed, but we can take another amendment to put forward what Grant has proposed, should he wish to.
Sorry, councillors, forgive me for intervening and perhaps giving a little bit of advice, or risk of creating a great deal of confusion here by, so as it stands at the moment, we have the paper, the recommendations moved and seconded. I understand you've asked for some additional amendments, but I think you have a mover and a seconder, and the risk is if you make any additional amendments without actually thinking about what your time frame is, we're going to get ourselves into quite a muddle. I would possibly suggest that actually you possibly want to take each of the numbers, and understanding that Councillor Shane has moved the paper in its entirety, but 1A through to E, pass to resolve, 2, whether you pass to resolve at that time frame. Otherwise, or you put the motion forward that as it's been moved and seconded, and just so councillors understand that if you vote against or whatever way you vote, the risk is if it falls against, then that provides some challenges around what once a paper has failed or has been lost, then you can't bring something back to the table.
Retract this.
Oh, that's not my right task. I'm just giving some guidance.
You need to take
So, councillors, Councillor Epihar, you originally moved this in its entirety?
Yes, I do, and I still do.
You still do?
What I want to know is that by moving this report procedurally, we're moving to the next stage, which is to ensure that our council and these residents talk further on to within the June, which is what was requested from, is that you, Graham, for 1 month. You asked to be deferred for 1 month.
Yeah.
By moving this, there's still a month for you to have conversations further in the development of, or what the outcome looks like. But I'm moving this report.
So in terms of it's been moved and seconded, which means then, as part as Tim described, that if if this is moved and seconded and passed, council staff will be out and engaging with the community through the period of from today through to a point in May, so that a final paper can be generated and brought back to council. So there's no, this isn't laying on the table and coming back in April, if that's what you're thinking. So we've put that stepped process into, we've got the time frame, it's released, we will engage with the community around the time frame, around the deed of license, etc. And we will bring some of that feedback back to the May, but we've been really clear that it's 15 years that you're going out with. And that's what we're engaging with the community on.
Correct. We've talked about grabbing a nettle.
You're not engaging to change.
Councillor Glidden?
Well, I guess by approving this report, that gives the finite date of 15 years. So I'd propose an amendment for 30 years.
And I believe that has been seconded by Councillor Munn. That's correct?
Correct.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Councillor Miller, you have your light on.
Are we debating the amendment now? I'm concerned with the way the debate is going, because we seem to be getting out of order a wee bit, and I was quite enamoured with the Chief Executive's view that we should take it in tranches and move our way through the paper in a logical way, because by supporting Councillor Epihar's motion, it negates the chance for us to consider the repayment schedule, which I proposed earlier on. So it's out of order. But if it's forced and I have to make a decision, I will. But I think it'd be better procedurally if we methodically work our way through. And I just suggest, I wonder if the chair would accommodate that suggestion.
The chair is unable to accommodate that suggestion because it has been moved in full. So we have an amendment on the table that the term be 30 years. Is there any discussion on that before I put that amendment? There being no discussion on that.
Sorry.
Oh, Councillor Dean.
Actually, I think Councillor Epihar was before me.
Yes, I was before you. Thank you. And I think in further reflection, it's prudent to look at a 30-year term to provide these people with the dignity. As much as it's a difficult decision to make, because it's not in isolation, and that's what I keep going back to. So you want to ensure that you have dignity and longevity in where you're staying, but there's a real cost to that, which all of you are aware. So the question really remains: is 30 years still affordable?
Can you?
And by removing my first motion for 15 years, I think it would be a blight on my integrity for flipping and flopping. I think at the end of the day, this is democracy in progress. We are discussing it as your representatives, and so we shouldn't all be of the same view, because then it's not a clear reflection of society. So I'm happy to put it to a vote, and I will stand with my first report.
Thank you, councillor Munt.
I'm confused as to what you're saying.
I'm sticking with 15 years in my initial move, staying with that, and then
So
so the
you're not
councillors have a
supporting,
different view.
you are not supporting the amendment? Right.
No.
Councillor Munt. You got your light on? What do you want to say? Councillor Deans.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak against the amendment. I do not support the change to 30 years. I think that this is something that has been going on for some time. I think that there is time to draw some line in the sand. It is as Councillor Miller said at the very beginning, this is not a nice thing to do, but it's happening at some point. I also reflect on what my colleague next to me has said about Mana Whenua's view, is that to have this done and to in fact accept that 10 years and 15 years were too long. So I will be voting against the amendment to raise it to 30 years.
Thank you, councillor Deans. Councillor McInnes.
Yep, just to say that I still stand in support of 15 years. Part of that is to do with the progressive change at the other communities. So obviously Green Park is this year. There's a transition over the next 10 years for Lower Selwyn huts. We need to, as the report states, participate in a collaborative and consistent approach. If we keep flipping on this and changing, moving those goalposts never-endingly, this is not, on the one hand, 30 years sounds like dignity. On the other hand, it's just kicking the can down the road again.
Thank you. Councillor Munt, speaking to the amendment.
No, I wanted to raise another amendment.
No, I'm sorry, there's an amendment in process. You can't raise another amendment while there's one. So, being no further discussion on the amendment, I will now put the amendment. The amendment is that in number 2, that the periods of 5 years to a maximum of 30 years. All those in favour will say aye. Would you put your hands up, please? 2, 3. Okay, those against? The amendment is lost. We will now move on to substantial resolution from which was moved by Councillor Epiha and seconded by Councillor McInnes. And
I'd like to propose an amendment to another amendment, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Deans.
That's section number 4 of the. I'll make sure I've got the right section number 4, which currently reads that council agrees to the Upper Selwyn Huts portion of the Pines wastewater treatment plant Pine Lines connection with 50% funding. I would like to move that be reduced to 30%.
Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Seconded Councillor Miller. Any discussion on the amendment? Councillor Munt. Discussion on the amendment? No. Any other discussion on the amendment that the percentage be changed to 30%? Councillor McInnes.
More query to staff, is there any way of a rough figure of what impact that would have on the rates for the rest of the district? Because obviously that's exactly what we're saying, that the rest of the district will pay 70%.
Is that question able to be answered?
I would say that without a finance person being here, we wouldn't be able to create that answer to you right now.
And councillors, I'd just like to remind you that there are other communities in Selwyn that have paid for their sewerage schemes, some of them twice, Lincoln being one of them. The community that I live in has also paid for its system on its own well before we had district-wide rating. So think long and hard about the effects on those ratepayers across the district. when you vote.
I'd like to speak to the amendment at the end as the mover of the amendment, if I may.
You may. Is there any other debate on the amendment? There being no other debate, you're free to speak.
Sorry, the whole reason for my amendment there is basically it's just a mathematical time thing. It's the 15 years. We know it's a 50-year pipeline. It's approximately 30% of the time that the Upper Selwyn Hutt owners will have access to it. Now, I believe that the Selwyn district will benefit from having the pipeline there for the full 50 years, which is the expected lifetime, and it's purely a mathematical thing.
Okay. No more discussion on the amendment. I will put the amendment. All those in favour of the figure in number 4 being moved to 30%, raise your hand, please. Those against? I declare it carried. So, yeah, fair enough. Okay, we now move back to the substantial motion, which I think we have danced around the table long enough. I'm going to put the resolution as proposed by Councillor Epihar and seconded by Councillor McGuinness. All those in favour will raise their hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, councillors. That has been a long and torturous process. There has been a lot of emotion in the room. I too was on the Southern Selwyn Reserve Committee meeting with Bob in 1992, and so I'm well aware of the history. Thank you for your attendance today, and we are now going to adjourn for a tea break.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, councillors. Welcome back. We are now on tab 9, Road Safety Advisor Interim Speed Management Plan. Over to you, team.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Quickly to introduce this report and just talk a wee bit to it. We all recall that following the last council meeting and a presentation in public forum, a verbal update was requested and was presented through the Transport and Infrastructure Committee on the speed management plan. In that update, we indicated that the team here at Selwyn were continuing to work on the introduction of safer speeds around schools, despite the government not having produced a new set of rules yet, and that they were now developing an interim speed management plan, which is the paper before us. In developing this, our work has been based on the consistent indications and the consistent messaging which has come out of the coalition government and through the Minister of Transport, and particularly references his communication that was issued on the 12th of December, that they would not be supporting permanent reductions in speeds around schools. Instead, the support would be for variable speed reductions confined to school drop-off and pick-up times. This paper this afternoon seeks 2 approvals from Council. Firstly, approval of the interim speed management plan, and secondly, approval to purchase signage required to implement school speeds within that plan. We acknowledge that even when the plan goes forward, there may be tweaks and amendments to that as we proceed through the NZTA Whakatahi and the ministry approval process, but we're focused on achieving 2 key outcomes. And to conclude, those 2 key outcomes are, firstly, we're making a start on introducing safer speeds. Variables might not be what everyone seeks, but it's a start and it's certainly a step in the right direction. And secondly, currently we have approved funding of $1.3 million to support the work if we get approved, sitting in this year's plan and NLTP. This funding expires on the 30th of June. If we do not use it, we lose it. And time is now limited to get this spent by the end of June. So the road safety team, Jeff, and Ravi, Sam, Mike, are all here to support any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Shane?
So move, Mr. Chair. And just one question to Gareth. How does your report support the previous speaker, Blair Tumuaki from Lemonwood?
Specifically in terms of Lemonwood, if you look at the interim speed management plan, without diving, there's a lot of pages to dive into from memory, it will introduce, it will satisfy the comment from Blair about East Madison's Road, because it will seek to reduce that from 60 to a permanent 50 along the school frontage in terms of that permanent block there as well. But it brings variable 30 signs in around the school during the school time. So on the main routes, we will put electronic variables, and on the supporting side roads, there'll be static variables.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGuinness.
Yep, really appreciate you bringing this back to us. Thank you very, very much. We've got that funding, we want to use it well. Appreciate as well that it's not just schools in the interim SMP, it's also other areas that are known to be dangerous and in need of a reduced speed limit. My question is, I've actually got a question, do you think that this will be approved in time for us to actually follow it through? Obviously, we don't know unless we try, but what's your thoughts?
We're following the messages that have come out of the government. And that's what they're saying they're seeking.
Thank you. Megan.
Kia ora. I want to speak to the default speed around Te Pā o Muki Marae, and it's been recommended to reduce to 60 kilometres per hour at pick-up and drop-off times. And my understanding is that Taumi Turunanga requested this be a permanent shift and that it be a longer distance and past the turn off to our church and starting earlier. And so that's a request to amend to align with the request of Mana Whenua. And then the second point is in the paper, it talked about community consultation, but it didn't mention Taumitu. And I'm not suggesting that it should, but I would request that if Taumitu are submitting, they very rarely submit on anything, it would be really helpful to know that information. It was by chance that I found out yesterday, and I wouldn't have been able to advocate for them. So thank you.
Yeah, so in relation to consultation, apologies, it's not in the report to council. However, Mana Whenua is referenced in the actual speed management plan as having been consulted with and the outcome in relation to that. In relation to the variable speed limit, Pastor Marae, we've tried to keep it consistent with all other avenues of implementation across the board. We can certainly revisit the possibility of a permanent 60 through there. We attributed it to being a variable with the provision that it would be able to be turned on and off when you had functions and the likes as well, as opposed to not just pick up drop-off times, but there is a facility to manually instigate those variable signs when required.
I'll just, to provide a little bit of clarity, it's really hard to determine pick-up and drop-off times for Marae, particularly around tangi and whānau and intentions to arrive at certain times. But also we don't actually have any pick-up and drop-off times, and our Marae is used by the community for 96% of our occupancy. And they're mostly schools, and we're always fully booked. So it will be really difficult to have a drop-off and pick-up time.
Continue to look at it and work on it going forward.
Continue to look at it and work on it going forward. Thank you, Gareth.
I've got the same question, but a slightly different angle at it. So I'm going to have another crack. Has Waka Kotahi or anyone actually stipulated what drop-off and pick-up times are?
They haven't, but if you consistently look at variable speed limits which are in, the ones we made a point to look at some of these last week that are in the city, the drop-off time is 8:30 till 9, and the pickup time was 3 to 3:20, I believe.
So the reason why I ask is that we've heard today from Blair from Lemonwood, and we've heard regularly from West Melton that their drop-off and pickup times go well into the evening. So maybe we should be applying drop-off and pickup times that we know they are. If they're not stipulated by Waka Kotahi, then maybe we set the devices for what we know the drop-off times are.
Yeah, for the variable speed signs, there is actually a stipulation that it can only be activated 30 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon around a particular time. We have had the discussion within the team that if we can't find a particular window that suits that we have the ability to set the times, and we would potentially go back to Waka Kotahi and say 20 minutes in the afternoon does not fit our purpose, and therefore we'll seek clarification as to whether we can extend that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hassan.
Thank you. Just for clarification, with regards to the funding, that still involves NZTA funding up until the 30th of June? Thank you. Now my next, sorry?
That's correct. It's subsidised funding, so 51% Waka Kotahi.
Okay, thank you. Now, my next question is actually on page 247, and it's Appendix A in the Interim Speed Management Plan. And I have to ask this on behalf of a ratepayer who lives on Hamptons Road, heading towards the new roundabout. And I note that you actually have a green dot there, and you're proposing that the speed go from 80k down to a permanent 50k. Am I reading that green line properly, that it actually goes to the left of the map, down towards the roundabout, which there'll be residential on one side going forward with all the plan changes and rural on the other? So it's compatible with Selwyn Road?
Correct. So those two are currently, I believe, 80 kilometres an hour, and there is meant to be a roundabout situated at that intersection. So it's to incorporate consistent speeds on all legs and entering into that roundabout of 50 kilometres an hour.
Okay. Now going down further, down Hamptons Road towards the roundabout on Shane's Road, that will also be down to 50k?
Yeah, it means on the leg. Yeah.
Because I can see I can see a green line there.
Yep. It's currently 50 kilometres an hour.
That's currently 50.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. I'll let the ratepayer know. He thought it was higher than that. He thought it was sitting at 80.
We've known each other. We know each other. Look at the exact location. It's hard to determine. There's too much with the shambles and etc. Might be worth discussing.
Because the plan is to have up through Springs Road, the traffic coming from Lincoln, and then turning to the left on your map down to the roundabout at the end of Hamptons and Shands as a bypass for Prebbleton.
I think the important thing here, Councillor, is, as Mike has explained, I mean, if that leg of Hamptons Road is an approach to the roundabout, the plan here is those approaches to the roundabout will be reduced to 50 kilometres an hour.
Okay, so it won't be the whole of Hamptons Road from...
Not the whole of Hamptons Road.
Just where it approaches
Just
the roundabout.
approaches.
So Mr. White's missed out.
No, he might not have, actually. He's the
So are
second
you
house
finished,
in.
Deborah, with your questions?
Yes, I am.
Councillor Reid.
Thanks for bringing this to us. I'm quite pleased that we're discussing this today, because I wasn't sure whether we would be looking at them after what we'd heard, what we ended up doing end of last year. So I'm really pleased to see that we've got this come through. Following on from Phil talking about, where do you set the times? I mean, and reference what was spoken to us today from Lemonwood Grove's school principal. I mean, the same question could be asked with West Rolleston School, who's, you're totally aware that have been to see us a number of times, that particularly with their school, that they have the bike scooter park, which is used outside of hours and over the weekends by various children. And obviously having 30 when they're walking to school, it's a different situation when they're going there themselves in the out of school hours. So I hope that we could have a consideration of looking at whether we could have some sort of change with that. As you were going to talk to Waka Kotahi about longer times of having lower speed limits, if that's possible. Now, following on from Mr. Vinsky talking before, from Lemonwood Grove, he was also saying about with new subdivisions going in and actual speed limits being higher because of historically where they were, and then still being higher than expected when the houses go in and such like that. Do we have a system on where we can preempt when houses are going in, so we can have the speed limits already there ready to go for that area, as in being an urban speed limit as opposed to a rural, which it would have been before it was developed?
Yes, it is. I got some information on that, and we'll send that through to you offline, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Glidden.
Thank you. Last night on the news, I saw the minister stating that the government will not be requiring electronic signage. And I was quite surprised by that, to see that on an interview on 3 News. And I guess so my question is around where does this leave us with the variable intersections? If we're looking at a cost of 200k per intersection, does the funding that we have here include that? And if not, where is the funding going to come from for the variable electronic signage on these intersections if the minister is saying they do not require it? I've totaled it up as $1.6 million in electronic signage for variable intersections.
No, we've not received any communication for that. The funding, let's be clear, the funding that we currently have is sufficient funding to implement safer speeds around schools this financial year. Any future funding for intersections and any other adjustments has been applied for in the next NLTP, which is from the 1st of July onwards for 24-27. That hasn't been approved yet, so I assume that any changes that the minister and government made will be reflected through that plan. What's currently before us today is the use of the $1.3 million, which has been earmarked for schools, and to get that school signage in.
And which I wholeheartedly support, using that for our schools. I think it's really important to protect our children. I guess, yeah, I just have questions around that. And with approving the interim speed management plan, what implications does that have for us on the LTP with the variable speed signs? I guess I have a couple of other questions here if you want me to carry on.
We've currently allowed for it in our planning. Whether it's news to us, that information has not come through about not backing electronic signage.
Yeah. I was surprised too.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit that if when it does.
Even if there is a direction come out from government to say that we don't have to put in electronic signage, all research indicates that electronic signage, if you're going to use a variable speed, is far more effective than static signage. And currently we have the budget to do that approved to put in electronic signs, which are far safer than a static sign and obtaining drivers' attentions and actually forcing speeds down. So even if a direction comes to say you don't have to use electronic variable signs, they are recognised as a better option for safety purposes than a static sign.
Well, you wouldn't be able to use static signs at a variable intersection. Like, I'm not talking about the schools.
Yep.
I'm not talking about the schools. Like with the schools, just like, let's get it done. Let's get on with it and support the schools. But what I'm saying is about the intersections is you wouldn't be able to use static signs at an intersection. So I guess I'm wondering what the implications of funding are.
I would say that's a different conversation, because what he would have been talking about would have been variable signs at schools, because an intersection speed zone is designed with electronic signs. That's how they operate.
Okay. And so my other question is, what is the scope of, and just to quote here on page 176, unless it aids in seamless safety environment, when you talk about no wider reductions will be imposed. So is there criteria that you use for that, or is it the discretion of staff? 178 says network critical locations that have been identified will have reductions attributed and the immediate vicinity is required. No wider reductions will be imposed unless it aids in a seamless safety environment.
So when we talk about network critical locations, they are the particular intersection upgrades that we've applied for money in the next NLTP. In order to make those safety interventions, the speed limits need to be able to be lowered. So what we've done is we've kept quite a tight geographical point, so it's just that intersection. We haven't expanded the speed reductions geographically to take in other areas, A, because of consultation. There was a distinct lack of desire for reduced speeds. B, it's an interim speed management plan that we're trying to focus on specifically what we need to achieve and what we need to achieve now. There's the odd place where we've got two very close locations, such as the Shands Road roundabouts. If we were to, there would have been a space of about 300 metres between the roundabouts. So we've just included that as 60, that as an example.
It is data driven, not just us sat around the desk thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking.
The way it rolls.
Thank you.
I'm asking where.
Okay, thank you for that, councillors. I'm mindful of time. If we move on to Councillor Miller.
I think you may have answered my question, but I just want to test. I was a bit concerned for Ms Mackay that she's unable to move an amendment. You know,
No.
if we were to move an amendment that the 60 kilometres an hour outside the marae become permanent, would that derail your management plan? But on reflection, your response that the digital signs have a higher efficiency of slowing people down, it sounds like let's get the digital signs in and fine tune it later. It seems to be the approach. Is that what you're telling me?
And we can look at the locations and the extent of it to make sure we're covering the area that the marae is going to be involved, transport into and out of the marae covers. So whether it gets extended further down another 100 metres or whatever, I thought they covered quite an extent on that. I didn't think there were any entrances that were missed with that coverage. So
The church, the Urupa.
The only thing that I would say is that from personal experience, the digital signs have a greater effect at slowing me down than the static signs. So I'm quite an honest driver.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Representative Mackay.
Sorry, I didn't understand the answer. So I'm sorry that I've asked to, taken two goes of it. But so when you say that you can look at it again later, but it needs to go through a certification process, what does later mean? Does it mean in a year or two?
before it gets submitted to NZTA.
Oh, right.
So if you have a look at the type, I think for these, I think put it indicative, we've not finalised the exact points of where the start and finishing was going to be. We need to do that on the site-by-site assessment. We didn't want to go and assess every one of these sites in a short space of time that we have, and now we can control that. If we get this approval, we'll finalise these exact spots as we go forward before it then is submitted to NZTA, which will be quick steps because we want to get this.
Right, and I think maybe you might want to have a conversation offline.
Yes, and that would be helpful. But the 60, but there's still the issue of the 60. And when you talked about those time frames, they wouldn't even suit our school drop-offs, which use the marae regularly because they go to school at that time. When they come to us and when they leave us is completely different. So it wouldn't really meet the needs. So.
Thank you, Megan. Now we have a mover in Councillor Epihar. I'm looking for a seconder, Councillor Miller. All those, no more discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. I hear it carried. Thank you. Right, we'll now move on to item 12, the item 10, the Greater Christchurch Partnership Spatial Plan Adoption. Rob's going to dance. Thank you.
Sorry, no, today's out there coaching his boys' basketball game today. So only me, but you do have George to join us as well. So conscious of time, so you were briefed about the spatial plan last week. So the Greater Christchurch Partnership team would have gone through all the detail and the process that they've got to where it's got to. But I guess some of the key points is that it is a strategic approach to urban growth and development across the whole Greater Christchurch area. So those large scale aspects which need aligned thinking and collaboration are part of the purpose of the spatial plan. It also identifies priority development areas where the core of Rolleston and key PT corridors would be part of those PDA areas. Also is required for us to comply with our future development strategy requirements under the National Policy Statement of Urban Development. And just to note, it has gone through a full public process, so full submissions, full engagement and full hearing process. So we'll get into any questions.
Thank you. We have been socialised with this in the last week. Any questions? Otherwise, Councillor Munt.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, while there's some aspects of the spatial plan, I'm not going to vote for it today because I'm not happy with what the spatial plan brings to the Christchurch region in particular. And I mentioned last week when you came in, it's going to send a rail potentially down the centre of it and split it in half. And I have other reasons, including some of the other more advanced things that are going to be happening under the spatial plan with the housing intensification modelling. I'm not entirely sure that the process was robust enough for me from what I've seen in terms of the community engagement.
Thank you for input. Representative Mackay.
Yes, all of my questions were answered last week when Greater Christchurch Partnership came on the spatial plan, but you have just mentioned about the priority development areas and threw out a couple of ideas there. So I just want to also say that throughout the entire process, Mana Whenua has said that a priority development area based on treaty should be enabling Papakāinga living in the urban environment. And what that means to us, which has been described to Greater Christchurch Partnership, but not in this forum, is having tikanga-based living in urban environments. So having homes that we want without fences or with fences, but in accordance with our values. So I would hope that Selwyn continues to support that as they have done at the Greater Christchurch Partnership. My question is, when do we actually get to talk about priority development areas? Is there a time frame attached to implementation of the spatial plan?
So I think at the next Greater Christchurch Partnership meeting, that is going to be deciding what are the priorities of the priority development areas. So I'm not too sure what the date of that is, but it should be coming forward.
Yeah, so a great question. So included in the spatial plan, priority areas is a broad concept, and within that there's priority development areas, which Bob alluded to the one in Rolleston. There's priority areas that are from Titiriti, which it talks about MR873 in particular, Kaiapoi, and also there's the Kanga Nohanga strategy that was talked about last week, where we'll be exploring not just Kanga Nohanga on Māori land, but also urban Kanga Nohanga as well. So that will be developed through the Kanga Nohanga strategy. The after the hopefully the spatial plan has been endorsed by the partnership, and then the partner councils are going through the process of adopting it now. There will be a meeting, like Bob said, to go through the priorities of the priorities, because there's a lot of mahi associated with the spatial plan in loads of different spheres. So that's to come. But yeah.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Reid.
And I'll move the report, please. So as you all know, I represented our council on the hearings panel, and I found that the whole process went very smoothly, and with the guidance and help of Tracy Tierney and her staff. And I think as a panel we worked well together, led by Stephen Daish, and we definitely heard a wide spectrum of views on a number of topics related to the plan. But I did want to mention what was notable about the process was the inclusion of the youth in the conversations and having the youth hearing day held at Canterbury Universities. They're the ones who are going to be most affected by this plan, and so it was entirely appropriate their participation in the process. And it is something that I think maybe we could, on some of the work, future work that we do, that maybe take these sorts of things on board. We have the Youth Council, but just ways that we get out into the community when we're consulting on things. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Epiha.
Kia ora, ngā mihi mana. Happy to second the report, and thank you, Nicole, and to the councils that have worked on this. Yeah, just reflecting on that page 268, 1,300 youth, 386 rangatahi, and supporting the aspirations of Mana Whenua through partnership certainly is throughout the document, and completely support that as we prosper and grow our partnership closer together here locally. But what I wanted to ensure that by design and that in future, that not only does it enable, but it makes housing and further development affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Look, I'll be voting for it, but I'm going to register two things which I think have really disappointed me in this plan. The first thing, which won't be news to you, is the lack of foresight in the MRT. Just stopping at Hornby is anathema to me. It's just a lack of foresight, and I think we will live to regret the day that we actually voted for that, because history tells you cities all around the world who keep saying the old refrain, if only we'd done it when we had the time. And this is this is a typical New Zealand solution. Let's do it on the cheap, and we'll do it later, and someone else will do it. And I think it's a sad indictment on our ability to get things through that Christchurch has really rammed this down our throat, and Waimakariri too, to some extent, of let's strengthen our own communities and stop the PT routes within the city, not the PT, the MRT routes within the city, and leave us on buses and a future bus network, which is what it'll only ever be. And it's a major disappointment to me that we haven't progressed that. The second thing I want to raise is I'm really supportive of the Christchurch International Airport being 24/7, but I am concerned about the reach they have and the ability around noise contours to influence our development and our going forward. And it's unusual, isn't it, when you get an organisation, which is a private company in all respects, developing its own noise contours which affect the public. Whereas it should be the other way around, is that we should develop the noise contours. And on mitigation, if I'm happy to live under the flight path of an aeroplane, so be it. If you choose to live somewhere, that's the thing. So there's two things which sort of disappoint me in the plan, but other than that, I think the team has done a really good job. And MRT, what a disappointment.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I echo your sentiments with MRT. I was previous representative on that committee in the last term, and the Mayor and I certainly pushed hard to try and bring it through the middle out here to service Rolleston, and so was Sophie, to service Rolleston and Lincoln and the growing communities we have. So there being no other lights on, I'll put the resolution, report 5, the adoption of the Christchurch Partnership Special Plan adoption. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Against? Elizabeth voted against it. I will declare it carried. Thank you very much for all your input, George, Rob, staff, and Nicole on the panel. Right, we'll now move on to the submission, tab 11, submission on the draft Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan. This is something that has been done, so it's a retrospective approval.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, thank you for that. This we are seeking retrospective endorsement of the submission that was provided to Environment Canterbury on the draft Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan. I've got Ryan joining me here today, who can talk through some of the key parts of the submission.
I won't take up more of your time than necessary. It's reasonably straightforward, and I'll take it mostly as read. The only thing I will point out in it, we did talk about the new draft GPS hadn't come out at the time of preparing this report. As some of you may be aware, it has come out now, and we will be expecting that the RLTP will need to be responsive to that. We are preparing a report on that another report submission on the draft GPS currently, and we know that there's probably a number of you who do have strong opinions and want to input on that, so we will kind of get it out as soon as we can so that you can add to that, but that'll be coming shortly.
Thank you. That segues me into Sophie.
Just want to say thank you very much, gentlemen, and I'd like to move the report.
Thank you, Sophie. Have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dean. No more questions? All those in favour? A bit louder, please. Aye. Thank you. Those against? Carried. Thank you for your input, Ryan, into that. Okay, now we are going to move on to tab 12, the long-term plan. Following on from the workshop last week, we had unanimous support for the need to go out unaudited. There's been a great deal of work put into this for our staff, and it's now time to take this to the public for their comment, and I'm sure the public will give us their comment as we go forward. Tim.
Thank you. As you said, we raised this with you last week, so I won't go through the detail of the report. One thing I would like to bring to the council's attention is that the auditors did want to make it clear, and it is the case, that on page 16, which is the Appendix 1, in the second box, we say that the audit will need to commence no later than the 4th of June. That is correct, but we are right now in the process of giving information, underlying information on our financial assumptions, etc., to the audit. So they wanted to make it clear that we weren't going to do anything until the 4th. We are doing something now, and we'll continue to work with the auditors right up to the June the 4th. June the 4th is when they do their final sign-off, if I can put it like this. But up until then, we're working hard in terms of getting pieces of information to them, and that we will continue to do that and work with the auditors to get into a position where we can get it, the whole long-term plan signed off by the end of June. So I just wanted to make that point. Other than that, I think you're familiar with the options. There's not many other options we have at the moment other than the one that is recommended. The 3 other options are versions of deferrals, and they all involve getting some sort of annual plan to consultation at the end of June, and under our current time frames, that would be put us in a worse position than we are now. I'll leave it at that. Happy to answer some questions.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have any questions? Okay, do we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Dean, Councillor Hassan. I will put the resolution. All those. Oh, Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, no, I didn't have a question. It was just to reconfirm that it does mean that I won't be participating in the deliberations. So we're meeting with Tomutu tomorrow to determine whether or not that means I still participate in the hearing process as well. Yeah.
Thank you for that point of clarification. I will put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, we're now moving on to appointment of hearing panel Castle Hill Village Reserves, and I believe local councillors have some concerns.
I don't know if it was specifically concerns, but maybe we should wait for the staff to get to the front for their paper. It's you.
Floor's yours, Derek.
Tēnā koutou katoa. The report before you was largely procedural to appoint a hearing panel for the Castle Hill Reserves Management Plan, and so maybe taken as read. However, I would draw your attention to the fact that, and it might be what you were discussing before I arrived, with the recommendation before you doesn't include a member of the Melbourne Community Board. By way of background, the Melbourne Community Board was a submitter on the draft management plan, and it's because of this that it's staff's view that they would be unable to give fair representation on the panel, and that we should adopt a conservative approach to avoid any perception of a conflict of interest. So, I'll hand it back to the council to debate that issue.
Councillor Glidden.
And yeah, so this is what I'd like to discuss, or I guess seek some clarification on, is around the conflict of interest. The board did submit on the reserve management plan, and it was the previous board. They would like to withdraw their submission and have someone appointed to the panel. Now, I guess the discussion is around, is that still a conflict of interest?
I'll throw to you, Chief Executive.
That's a very good question, and one I can't answer off the top of my head without probably taking some advice. Yeah, and again, they have some. It's exactly right, but in terms of being able to give you a reasonable answer, I'd have to understand the legalities. There's a public perception, but there is also a legal advice and guidance that needs to be sought.
Yes, and so the person that we had thought about appointing was not a member of the previous board.
Yeah, but it's the board per se has
Board
put
per
in a
se.
submission.
Okay.
And so whilst they may wish to withdraw, there's two things here. There's public perception and there's legal. So well, I can't tell you the legal. The public, I think, is pretty evidence for itself. You can't put in and then, but you can take out. However, the public may have a different view of that.
So can this lie on the table?
That's the question I want to ask. What's the time constraints on this piece of work? If this lies on the table, it means it doesn't come back to us till when? April?
Yes.
So it's quite a sizable chunk of time. What's your program of work with this?
Yeah, it has. There's been a lengthy delay. The submissions closed nearly 12 months ago, so it's already been a very lengthy process. So we were looking to push it ahead, but.
So I think it's perception. It fails the front page test straight away to my mind, but I'm not a lawyer. So I think we probably need to go ahead with the recommendation, but I would like to get 2 names to put in it of councillors who want to be involved.
Sorry, can I just seek clarification? I might be reading the wrong thing here, but your recommendation says at least one Malvern Ward councillor. You're talking about councillor, not a Malvern Ward, not a Malvern Community Board member, yes?
That's correct.
I've got an interest in putting my name forward.
Okay, so we have at the moment, we have councillor Glidden and councillor Mugford wishing to put their name forward. Do we have another councillor? Councillor McInnes.
Got my
Oh, sorry, councillor Dean.
I have a question. I'm interested in the position. I'd like to know a little bit more about it. And in one minute or one sentence, can someone tell me what it's about?
Can you do that with an interpretive dance?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm happy to put my name forward.
Okay.
That's right, I'm good with that. I did always reserve that. It was more,
Okay.
I couldn't see anybody else putting a hand up.
Okay, there's one chair here, please. So at the moment we have councillor Glidden, Mugford and Dean are the 3 names we're looking at putting in this. So we'll make that part of the
But I think
resolution.
there is scope for a 4th.
Yeah, I think, yeah, uneven's better. So with those names being inserted, will we move the resolution that councillors Mugford, Glidden and Dean be appointed as the panel? Moved by councillor Hassan, seconded by councillor McInnes. All those in favour? Aye, carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 14, Traffic and Parking Bylaw Amendment, Green Park Sands. It's being moved by councillor Reid. Seconded by councillor Hassan. Where is it? All those in favour? Any discussion? No discussion?
Yes.
All those in favour say aye.
I want to ask the question.
Oh, sorry, councillor Miller. And Bob's there.
One of the
Can't see your
concerns
light.
that's been raised here is vehicular access. But how does it, how will the lock gates cater to local people who go floundering and catching fish down there? How will they access those lock gates?
Thanks, Grant. So as part of the working group that we formed in 2022, we've worked closely with Fish and Game around that to ensure that that during the hunting season that responsible users can still have access to that area, or they can drive more closely to their mai-mais. So we're trying to allow for responsible users while also cutting the access to the irresponsible users that are causing significant damage.
So they'll be able to access a key.
Okay, so that answers the questions. Bob?
Are there any other places in Selwyn where this would be a valuable tool to use?
There are some other places around Lake Linden, for instance, or down the Linden Road. There's definitely issues with access and damage to our native habitat around those areas as well. So we may need to look at that too. There's probably a wider scope of actually how you control those access points, because it's quite a big area. But yeah, I think there will be other times, Bob, where we may need to look at this sort of thing. Yes, because we're definitely seeing, as we all know, there's a lot more people driving four-wheel drives, and a certain percentage of them just want to take them in silly places, irrespective of the damage.
Thank you, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, I know that it's a really popular bird watching area, so I'm going to ask, can we not have padlocked gates the whole way across but have access? And I thought I did see in the document that you did say there was going to be a walk-through gate option. Just wanted to make sure that obviously there's a lot of older men that like to go down with their binoculars. Can we make sure that it's easy access for them, and relatively, wide enough for them, but to get through and nothing too difficult?
Yeah, accepted, Elizabeth. Yes, we definitely don't want to constrain the responsible users that want to go down there and look at birds.
Councillor Reid.
I was really pleased to see this on the agenda. Thanks for bringing it to us, and it's so good to hear the positive responses to it. I mean, the first time I heard about this issue was, I think, about 3 or so years ago on a Waihora Ellesmere Trust bus trip, and we went to Green Park Sands, and Tim Davey talked about it, and you could see the damage that was happening then. But yeah, it's obviously quite a process to get to where we are now, but this is definitely the way that we need to be going, and to look. And it's good there was a question asked about other areas, because we do need to be looking at preserving this delicate flora and fauna around our district. So thanks for that. And I also had Ken Huey, when I put it through to Waihora Ellesmere Trust the other day that it was coming through, he put through that he had been advocating for some time for this, so he was quite pleased about
Thanks, Nicole. I guess, and also it's a chance some of you might not have met Johanna, who started with us as our biodiversity person last year. And interestingly enough, Johanna did her master's degree when she was at Lincoln on this particular subject, and so she's very well informed with it. So it's come a nice circle, really. So.
Welcome, Johanna. Okay, Representative Mackay.
Kia ora, just to speak in support of and to acknowledge Johanna, who we supported through your research. This has been a long time coming. This is true treaty partnership. We have asked and you have delivered, so thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you. Sophie.
Yep, just a quick addition from me. We had the Selwyn Waihora Water Zone Committee meeting last Monday, and I mentioned that this item was coming up, and everyone was very supportive. So that's another tick. Thank you.
Actually, Sophie, I guess that partly is partly a response also to what Bob brought up as well, is that there is potentially some discussion coming up around vehicle usage on the Waikirikiri-Selwyn River and the ease of access to that as well, and the damage to the riverbed itself. So that's something that will probably come up, including through the zone committee, I imagine.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. So, and all this is very timely. There'll be no more discussion. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? I declare it carried. Thank you for your input. I would now like to welcome our representatives from Orion in the back room. What have we got next?
Oh, yeah. Thought you were jumping to You've still got tab 15.
Yeah, we have, but welcome to the back of the room. Head of Acquisitions and Disposal Leasing is what we've got here for Orion, a 15.
I'm happy to move that report as it's read.
Moved by, seconded by Mugford. All those in favour? Thanks, Rob. Lydia?
I was just going to ask, is the current licensee aware of this? And does the construction of the lines have any effect on the farm?
The current licensee is aware of it, and he's jointly discussing it with ourselves and Orion, and there may be some compensation issues which we're working through with them.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Miller.
What size is that reserve in its entirety?
I think it's 2.0234
Okay, thank
hectares.
Okay, being no further questions, put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you, Rob, for your input. Now we move on to disposals and leasing of Hororata. So that's you again, Rob. Hororata Recreation Reserve. Moved Miller. Seconded Epiha. Any questions on this? No questions of formality. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you very much. Now we're moving to stormwater disposals, Mountain View Place, Leaston.
So move.
Moved by Councillor Epiha, seconded by Councillor Munt. Do we have any conversation we wish to have? Any questions? It's fairly self-explanatory. Okay, I'll move the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you very much. Now moving.
Public forum, particularly Blair.
Now we need to discuss the public forum that we had today, particularly the first item on the public forum today, which was Blair from Lemonwood Grove School, Chief Executive.
I was just going to suggest, you heard from the team that the proposition that was put forward does lend itself to some of the action. So if councillors are happy that via the team will write back to Blair and just update him on the resolution from the speed management plan. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So now it comes to the time to move into public excluded. So can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Mugford, Councillor Epiha.